At 6 the next morning, a car worth more than Maya's entire building stopped outside her home.
Stay with the car. I need to speak to Maya Thompson alone. Maya Thompson, my name is Elena Ward. I represent Arthur Beaumont. I don't know anyone named Arthur Beaumont. You met him last night. That flower was with the old man. No. He refused to let it out of his sight. Arthur hid this inside the hollow stem. Men were searching for it. Why bring it here? Because he believes your father died protecting what is on this card.
The old man already knew who Maya was. She had no idea who he was. Thomas! You taught her the same knot!
That all for tonight?
It has to last until morning.
The last meal Maya Thompson owned was still warm when she gave it away. Half tonight, half tomorrow.
The last meal Maya Thompson owned was still warm when she gave it away. It was nothing special. A small paper container held rice, roasted vegetables, and 2 pieces of chicken purchased from the food stall beside Westbridge Station. Maya had counted her coins 3 times before buying it. The meal was meant to last through the evening and become breakfast the next morning if hunger allowed her to save half. She had not eaten since sunrise. Still, when she saw the old man sitting beneath the station awning, soaked by the November rain, and trembling so violently that he could barely keep his hands beneath his coat, Maya did not think about breakfast. She thought about her father. Thomas Thompson had once told her that hunger changed the way time moved. 10 minutes could feel like an hour when a person had nothing waiting for them. He had taught Maya never to walk past someone whose suffering she could reduce, simply because she could not solve the rest of their life. Maya had been 15 when he said that. She was 24 now, and almost everything her father had left behind had disappeared. The family apartment was gone. His tools had been sold. His compensation claim had been denied. The savings meant for Maya's education had paid for rent, funeral expenses, and the needs of her younger brother Noah. Only a few photographs remained, along with a dented metal badge carrying the golden emblem of the Beaumont Hotel Company. Maya kept that badge inside an old sewing box, without knowing why her father had brought it home. On the night she gave away her last meal, none of those memories felt connected to the man beneath the awning. He looked like someone the city had already stopped seeing. His gray hair hung wet against his forehead. Mud darkened the knees of his trousers. One shoe had split near the sole, allowing water to enter with every step. His coat had once been expensive, but the fabric was torn at the cuff and stained across the shoulder. People moved around him without slowing. Commuters held umbrellas above clean coats and hurried toward trains. Office workers looked at their phones. A security guard watched the old man from a distance, waiting for a reason to make him leave. Maya stood beside her flower cart near the entrance. The cart contained 8 unsold bouquets. Rain had damaged the outer petals of the roses. The lilies were beginning to close. The small bundles of wildflowers looked tired beneath plastic wrapping. It had been a terrible day. The station manager had already warned Maya that her permit would not be renewed if sales continued to block pedestrian traffic. Her landlord had delivered a final notice that morning. 2 months of rent were due, and unless payment arrived by the end of the week, Maya and Noah would lose the 1-room apartment where they slept on opposite sides of a curtain. Maya had applied for 12 jobs during the previous month. The Beaumont Grand Hotel rejected her for a junior floral assistant position because she lacked a completed design degree and professional hotel experience. Another company said her clothes did not match the image expected by luxury clients. She had smiled through each rejection. She had returned to the station. She had arranged flowers beneath cold fluorescent lights and told herself that surviving another day was still a form of progress. By 7 in the evening, she had sold nothing. Then she saw the old man. Maya carried the meal toward him. He raised his head slowly. His eyes were pale gray alert despite his exhaustion. For one strange second, Maya felt that he was examining her rather than simply noticing the food. She placed the container beside him and offered the bottle of water from her bag. The man did not reach for it immediately. His attention moved to Maya's cart. Only one small flower remained outside the plastic wrapping. It was a white chrysanthemum with a bent stem and bruised petals. Maya had planned to take it home because no customer would pay for it. She removed the flower and placed it beside the meal. Her father had believed everyone deserved something beautiful, even on days when beauty could not fix anything. The old man touched the flower with careful fingers. Then he looked at the knot securing the thin green ribbon around its stem. Maya always tied flowers the same way. She crossed the ribbon twice, folded the left end beneath the right, and pulled it tight into a flat knot that would not crush delicate stems. Her father had taught her that method when she was a child. The old man stared at the knot, as though it contained a message. Maya assumed hunger and cold had made him confused. She told him the food was his and returned to the cart. 5 minutes later, station security approached. The guard ordered the old man to leave. Maya protested that he was eating quietly and causing no trouble. The guard said complaints had been made and warned Maya that defending him could affect her permit. The old man rose before the disagreement grew worse. He carried the food in one hand and the flower in the other. His movements were unsteady, but he refused Maya's offer to call an ambulance. Before leaving, he looked at her name written on the cart, Maya's Flowers. His eyes remained on the word Thompson, printed in smaller letters beneath it. Then he disappeared into the rain. Maya watched until the crowd swallowed him. She did not know that his name was Arthur Beaumont. She did not know he had founded the hotel empire that rejected her application. She did not know newspapers had reported him missing for nearly 3 months. And she did not know that before approaching Westbridge Station, Arthur had spent 2 weeks trying to find the daughter of the man who once saved his life. Maya closed the cart at 8. She carried the damaged flowers home because throwing them away felt cruel. The apartment was dark when she entered. Noah sat at the small table studying beneath a lamp with a cracked shade. He was 14 tall for his age and serious in the way children became serious when they understood money too early. He asked whether Maya had eaten. She said she had. The lie came easily because she had practiced it through years of guardianship. After their mother died from illness, Thomas had raised them alone. When Thomas died, Maya became sister, parent, provider, and shield. Noah was 8 then. He knew grief, but Maya tried to protect him from everything that followed. He did not know how close they were to eviction. He did not know Maya had stopped paying for her own asthma medication regularly. He did not know the flower cart was one complaint away from removal. Maya told him the landlord had made an accounting mistake and that the notice would be handled. Then she placed the bruised flowers in jars around the room and went to bed, hungry. At 6 the next morning, an engine stopped outside the apartment building. The sound was too smooth and powerful for the delivery trucks that usually pass through their street. Noah pulled back the curtain. A long black luxury car stood beside the broken sidewalk. Its polished surface reflected buildings with peeling paint and boarded windows. The vehicle looked so out of place that several neighbors stepped outside to stare. A woman in a dark suit emerged from the rear door. She carried a rectangular box wrapped in cream-colored paper. A driver opened an umbrella above her as she approached the building. 3 minutes later, someone knocked. Maya expected the landlord, a debt collector, or perhaps the police. Instead, the woman introduced herself as Elena Ward, legal counsel and personal assistant to Arthur Beaumont. The name meant something only after Maya saw it printed on the card. Beaumont, the hotel company, the gold symbol on her father's old badge. The man newspapers described as one of the most influential figures in the hospitality industry. Arthur Beaumont had built luxury hotels in more than 20 countries. His family appeared in business magazines and charity campaigns. 3 months earlier, reports claimed he had withdrawn from public life because of poor health. Some articles suggested he had disappeared after a family dispute. Maya had never connected any of that to the old man beneath the station awning. Elena placed the cream-colored box on the table. Inside was the white chrysanthemum Maya had given away. The stem was still bent. The petals had wilted further. The green ribbon remained tied around it. Beside the flower was a small memory card, sealed in a clear plastic envelope. Maya looked at Elena. The attorney explained that Arthur Beaumont was safe and receiving medical attention. He had requested that Maya be brought to him as soon as possible. Maya asked why. Elena said Arthur believed Maya's father had died because of something the Beaumont family had concealed. The sentence changed the air inside the room. Noah stopped pretending not to listen. For 6 years, Maya had been told Thomas died in an accidental greenhouse fire caused by equipment failure and worker error. The company responsible had denied wrongdoing. Insurance investigators claimed Thomas entered a restricted area against safety instructions. His name appeared in the final report as a maintenance contractor who failed to follow evacuation procedures. Maya knew her father would never ignore danger. But poor families often received official explanations, as though questions were luxuries. She and Noah had received a small funeral payment. Their larger compensation claim disappeared inside legal delays. A company representative advised Maya to accept the tragedy and move forward. Now an attorney from the same empire stood in their apartment claiming the truth had been hidden. Maya did not enter the luxury car willingly. She entered because Noah was watching, and because every unanswered question about their father had just opened again. Elena arranged for a trusted neighbor to remain with Noah. Maya carried the metal badge from the sewing box. She had no idea whether it mattered, but the Beaumont emblem suddenly seemed less like a forgotten work item and more like a key. The car moved through neighborhoods Maya rarely visited. Broken storefronts became offices. Crowded apartment buildings became private residences behind walls. Eventually, the vehicle entered the underground garage of the Beaumont Grand Hotel. Maya had stood outside that hotel 6 weeks earlier before her job interview. She remembered adjusting her second-hand jacket in the reflection of the glass doors. She remembered the receptionist looking at her shoes. She remembered the hiring manager explaining that the hotel required candidates who understood luxury presentation. Now, private security guided her through an entrance used by executives. Arthur Beaumont waited in a suite on the highest floor. He looked different after a night of medical care. His hair had been washed and trimmed. He wore clean clothes. His face remained thin, and a bruise darkened one temple. But the man beneath the rain and dirt was clearly someone accustomed to authority. Maya felt embarrassed by the memory of offering him a meal worth less than $10. Then she remembered he had needed it. Wealth did not make the hunger unreal. Arthur held the chrysanthemum. The memory card no longer rested beneath its ribbon because Elena had removed it safely. Arthur explained that he had hidden the card inside the hollow stem of the flower, while Maya closed her cart. He had carried the device for days, while men connected to his son searched for him. The flower had been the first object no one thought to inspect. Maya's small act of kindness had given him food, but the flower had protected the evidence he was trying to save. Arthur began with Thomas. 18 years earlier, Thomas Thompson worked as a grounds and maintenance supervisor for Beaumont Properties. He specialized in greenhouse systems, irrigation, and historical gardens. He had not begun as a manager. He entered through temporary labor, learned every system, and became one of the most trusted workers at the original Beaumont estate. Arthur remembered him as patient, observant, and incapable of walking past a damaged plant without trying to save it. Thomas created the ribbon knot Maya still used. He tied young stems to supports without bruising them. Other gardeners copied the method. Arthur had recognized it at the station immediately. Years later, Thomas was assigned to supervise the restoration of a large glass conservatory connected to a new Beaumont resort. Arthur's son, Charles, managed the project. Charles was ambitious and impatient. He wanted the opening completed before the end of the financial quarter. Delays threatened investor confidence and his position within the company. Safety inspectors warned that parts of the heating system required replacement. Fire-resistant materials had been specified in the original plan. Charles approved cheaper substitutes. He also hired subcontractors through companies connected to his private business partners. Reports were altered. Inspection dates were changed. Workers who raised concerns were reassigned. Thomas discovered the discrepancies. He kept copies. He contacted Arthur and requested a private meeting. Before the meeting occurred, the conservatory caught fire. The official report blamed faulty equipment and unauthorized worker access. Thomas died inside. Arthur survived because Thomas carried him through a service corridor after smoke blocked the main exit. That detail had never appeared in the public report. Arthur explained that he had visited the site unexpectedly after receiving Thomas's warning. The fire began while he was inside the conservatory. Thomas guided him toward safety. Then Thomas realized a security office contained the copied documents. He returned. The roof collapsed before he came out. Arthur had spent years believing Thomas died trying to recover ordinary maintenance records. Only later did he understand those records contained evidence against Charles. Maya listened without moving. She imagined her father entering the flames twice. Once to save a billionaire. Once to save proof that might protect workers and his own name. The Beaumont family had allowed the world to remember him as careless. Arthur lowered his eyes. He admitted his own responsibility. After the fire, Arthur was hospitalized with smoke injuries. Charles controlled access to information. Company attorneys insisted public uncertainty would destroy the resort project and threaten thousands of jobs. Arthur accepted their explanation. He trusted his son. He approved a settlement strategy that minimized compensation and blamed contractors where possible. He did not ask enough questions about Thomas's family. He did not confirm that Maya and Noah received support. He allowed grief, weakness, and loyalty to become excuses for silence. Years passed. Charles rose through the company. Arthur gradually withdrew from daily management after his wife's death. He believed his son had matured into a capable leader. Then a former accountant contacted him. The accountant had kept copies of payments made after the conservatory fire. Money moved to inspectors, subcontractors, and a private security firm. Records showed that Thomas's compensation file had been deliberately reduced after internal attorneys described his family as unlikely to sustain a lawsuit. Arthur began investigating. He discovered that Charles had done more than hide the fire evidence. He had used company charities to pay private investigators, control witnesses, and force vulnerable employees into settlements. Several workplace injuries had been buried. Families were pressured to accept small payments. Safety complaints disappeared before audits. Arthur intended to remove Charles from leadership. Before he could act, Charles claimed his father was suffering from cognitive decline. Medical appointments were arranged through doctors loyal to the company. Board members received reports suggesting Arthur was confused, emotionally unstable, and incapable of managing risk. Charles secured temporary control. Arthur's phones were monitored. His staff changed. Access to accounts was restricted. The founder of the empire became a prisoner inside the family structure he created. Elena Ward remained loyal, but Charles removed her from Arthur's immediate team after she questioned the medical findings. Arthur escaped from a private residence with copies of the most important records. He attempted to reach Maya because Thomas's name appeared repeatedly in the fire documents. Arthur believed the daughter deserved the truth before any public battle began. Charles's security team followed him. At a bus terminal, two men took his wallet, identification, phone, and document case. They left him injured in an industrial district and assumed police would identify him as a confused elderly man. Arthur remained missing because shelters, hospitals, and local authorities accepted the story that he suffered from dementia. Charles had already prepared the explanation. For nearly 2 weeks, Arthur moved between public spaces, avoiding cameras and trying to remember Maya's address from an old compensation file. He reached Westbridge Station after following a lead connected to her flower permit. By then, he was exhausted, hungry, and uncertain whether he could trust anyone. Maya found him before he found her. That coincidence felt almost merciful. Maya did not experience it as mercy. She experienced anger. Arthur Beaumont had wealth greater than anything she could imagine. His hotels contained suites costing more for one night than her annual rent. Yet she and Noah had spent years counting food, moving between temporary housing, and carrying the shame of an official report that blamed their father. Arthur had known Thomas saved his life. He still allowed the family to disappear. Maya asked how many times gratitude had appeared in his thoughts while she left school to raise Noah. How many times he had walked past flower arrangements in hotel lobbies without wondering who raised Thomas's children. How many charity speeches he had delivered while the family of the man who saved him struggled alone. Arthur did not defend himself. He said regret did not become justice simply because a powerful man expressed it. Maya agreed. She refused his offer of money. At first, the refusal surprised everyone in the room. The amount Arthur offered could have paid their rent, Noah's education, and Maya's return to design school. But accepting it privately felt too similar to the settlements used to make other families disappear. Maya did not want to become a story about a poor girl rewarded for feeding a billionaire. Her kindness was not a lottery ticket. Her father's death was not a charitable opportunity. She wanted the truth corrected. She wanted the compensation legally owed to every harmed family. She wanted the workers' names restored. She wanted Charles investigated. Arthur understood. The memory card contained enough evidence to begin. Financial reports showed substitutions in construction materials. Audio files recorded Charles ordering staff to destroy inspection records after the fire. Emails described Thomas as an exposure risk because he had copied documents. A legal memorandum estimated how little the Thompson family could afford to fight. One sentence in the memorandum described Maya as a teenage dependent unlikely to organize effective representation. Maya read it twice. At 15, she had sat beside Noah's bed, pretending not to be afraid of eviction. In a corporate office, strangers calculated that fear and entered it as strategy. The memory card also contained recent evidence of Charles's campaign against Arthur. Medical reports had been altered. Board votes were manipulated. Security personnel received instructions to return Arthur to private care without police involvement. The story extended from a dead gardener to attempted control of the company founder. Elena had already made copies. Arthur contacted independent board members. Maya expected the evidence to end Charles's power immediately. Instead, power defended itself. Charles appeared at the hotel before noon. He entered the suite with attorneys, security officers, and a private physician. He wore a dark suit and the calm expression of a man who believed presentation could defeat truth. Charles resembled Arthur in the shape of his face, but not in the way he looked at people. His attention passed over Maya's clothes, shoes, and nervous hands. She felt evaluated and dismissed within seconds. He claimed Arthur had been manipulated. He described Maya as an opportunist who recognized a confused, wealthy man and invented a connection to the past. He said the memory card contained stolen company materials presented without context. Then he offered Maya money to leave. The offer was larger than Arthur's. That was the moment Maya understood Charles completely. He believed every person possessed a price, because money was the only language he respected. When Maya refused, his expression changed. He warned that her flower permit could be reviewed. Her rental history could be exposed. Her guardianship of Noah might be questioned if officials believed she lacked stable housing or income. The threat was polished, indirect, and familiar. It resembled the legal strategy used after Thomas died. Charles was not improvising. He was using the same method. Maya looked toward Arthur. She saw shame in the old man's face. This was the system his empire had created. Charles did not need to raise his voice. He could move institutions until a poor woman's life collapsed around her. Arthur ordered security to leave. The guards hesitated because Charles controlled the company. Elena contacted police and informed them that evidence of unlawful confinement and elder abuse had been preserved. Charles withdrew before officers arrived. He left Maya with a warning, disguised as concern. By evening, her problems had begun. The station canceled her flower permit due to a complaint about unauthorized food distribution and obstruction. The landlord announced that an anonymous party had offered to purchase the building and that every overdue account would face immediate enforcement. Online posts accused Maya of targeting Arthur Beaumont for money. A blurred photograph from the hotel showed her entering through the executive garage. Headlines described her as a flower seller involved in a dispute over the billionaire's mental competence. Charles controlled public relations well. He did not openly attack a young black woman caring for her brother. That would appear cruel. Instead, he encouraged doubt. Perhaps Maya misunderstood Arthur. Perhaps she had been coached. Perhaps she wanted compensation. Perhaps Thomas's old case had already been settled properly. The public did the rest. Some strangers praised her. Others called her a scammer. Reporters appeared outside the apartment. Noah learned about the fire evidence from social media before Maya could explain it carefully. He became angry that she had hidden their financial situation and frightened that Charles could separate them. Maya told him that no one was taking him away. She said it with confidence she did not feel. Arthur offered private housing. Maya refused to move into a Beaumont property. She accepted temporary legal protection through Elena and a nonprofit workers' rights organization. She wanted every decision documented independently. That caution impressed Elena. It also complicated Arthur's desire to fix things quickly. Arthur had spent his life solving problems through access and money. Maya forced him to confront the limits of both. He could purchase an apartment. He could not purchase trust. He could create a scholarship. He could not return 6 years. He could remove Charles from an office if the board cooperated. He could not erase the culture that allowed injured workers to become expenses. Repair required structure, not generosity. Maya returned to the station even without a permit. She did not sell flowers. She gathered the damaged bouquets and remaining supplies before officials removed the cart. A small crowd watched. Some people recognized her from the news. The same security guard who ordered Arthur away now supervised the cart's removal. He avoided Maya's eyes. Near the station entrance, a woman approached. Her husband had died in the conservatory fire with Thomas. His name was Luis Ramirez. The official report stated that Luis ignored an evacuation signal. The woman never believed it. After seeing Maya's story, she found an old voicemail in which Luis described blocked exits and dangerous heating units days before the fire. Other families came forward. A cleaner injured in a Beaumont hotel described being pressured to sign a settlement she could not read. A maintenance worker said Charles's managers regularly delayed repairs until after inspections. A former accountant confirmed payments used to silence inspectors. The individual cases formed a pattern. Maya's story stopped being only about one family. That changed everything. Charles could dismiss one flower seller as opportunistic. He could not easily dismiss dozens of workers whose injuries followed the same corporate methods. Elena organized the evidence with outside attorneys. Arthur called an emergency board meeting. Charles prevented it by challenging Arthur's competence and claiming the founder remained under medical supervision. The dispute moved toward court. Independent doctors examined Arthur. They found no evidence of dementia. He suffered exhaustion, trauma, dehydration, and medication effects from drugs prescribed during private confinement. Records showed dosages far beyond what his condition required. Charles's attempt to portray his father as incapable began to collapse. Still, the company board remained divided. Some directors feared scandal. Some owed their positions to Charles. Some argued that removing him before the opening of the new Beaumont Crown Hotel would destroy billions in value. The Crown was Charles's masterpiece. It stood 50 stories above the river, covered in glass and gold-toned metal. The lobby included indoor gardens inspired by the conservatory that burned. Charles planned to announce his permanent appointment as chairman during the opening gala. Investors, government officials, celebrities, and international media would attend. Arthur recognized the symbolism. Charles had built his greatest monument using a design language connected to the fire he buried. Maya saw something else. The hotel's main floral installations were being created by the same department that rejected her application. She had once hoped to arrange flowers in those rooms. Now her father's death stood beneath their foundations. Arthur wanted to confront Charles at the gala. Elena advised caution. A private board proceeding might protect the company and produce a cleaner transfer of leadership. Maya rejected that approach. The wrongdoing had been public only in its consequences. Workers died publicly. Families struggled publicly. Thomas's name was blamed in an official report available to anyone. Correcting the truth privately would protect the same reputation that enabled concealment. Maya wanted the evidence released. Arthur hesitated. Even after everything, part of him remained attached to the Beaumont name. He feared thousands of employees would suffer if the company collapsed. Hotels might close. Pensions might be affected. Investors could withdraw. Maya understood the concern. She also understood how institutions used innocent employees as shields whenever leaders faced accountability. The solution was not silence. It was careful exposure combined with protection for workers. Elena built a plan. The evidence would be shared with federal investigators, labor authorities, independent directors, journalists, and worker representatives at the same time. No single group could suppress it. Emergency legal motions would freeze suspicious accounts without stopping ordinary payroll. A temporary management committee would be prepared. The worker compensation framework would be announced alongside the revelations. Justice would not require destroying every person who depended on the company. It would require separating the institution from the people who abused it. Arthur agreed. Maya remained uncertain about appearing publicly. She did not want her face reduced to a symbol of kindness. The story had already become distorted. Some outlets described her as an angel who fed a homeless billionaire. Others focused on the luxury car outside her home. People debated whether she would become rich. Almost no one discussed why a young woman who worked all day had only one meal. Almost no one asked why the family of a dead worker had been allowed to fall into poverty. The sentimental version was easier. A good, poor girl helped a rich man and received a reward. Maya knew that version was dangerous. It suggested justice arrived because she had been unusually kind. What about families who were angry, exhausted, suspicious, or unable to offer food? Did they deserve less? Her father's name should be cleared because the evidence proved wrongdoing, not because Maya had passed a moral test at a train station. She decided to attend the gala only if worker families stood beside her. Arthur agreed. The days before the opening became more dangerous. Someone broke into Maya's apartment. Nothing valuable was taken. The sewing box had been opened. Her father's badge was missing. The message was obvious. Charles's people wanted to remove objects connecting Thomas to the Beaumont company. Noah blamed himself because he had left a window partly unlocked. Maya refused to let him carry that guilt. The burglary proved they needed safer housing, but she still would not move into Arthur's hotel. Elena arranged an apartment through an independent witness protection charity. Maya and Noah relocated quietly. The flower cart remained in storage. Without daily sales, Maya had no income. A community fundraiser began, but she accepted only enough to cover immediate living costs and legal expenses. Additional donations went into a fund for all fire families. Her decision confused commentators expecting a transformation story. Maya did not want designer clothes, a luxury suite, or a dramatic makeover before the gala. She chose a simple green dress from a local shop and repaired the hem herself. Noah wore their father's old tie. The badge was gone, but Maya carried a photograph of Thomas working inside the original conservatory. In the image, he held pruning shears and smiled toward someone outside the frame. The hotel opening began under thousands of lights. The Beaumont Crown lobby contained white stone floors, glass elevators, fountains, and enormous floral sculptures rising beneath the central dome. Guests admired the flowers without knowing the daughter of the gardener, connected to their design, was entering through the front doors. This time, Maya did not use the service entrance. Arthur walked beside her. He wore a dark suit and used a cane. His face showed the physical cost of the previous months, but his mind was clear. Behind them came Elena, independent directors, labor attorneys Luis Ramirez's widow, injured employees and families connected to the fire. Security attempted to stop the group. Arthur's legal ownership still gave him authority. The doors opened. Charles stood on a raised platform beneath the Beaumont emblem. He was presenting the hotel as the beginning of a new era. Large screens displayed images of the company's history, charitable programs, and promises of sustainable growth. Thomas Thompson appeared nowhere. Neither did the workers who died building the older projects. Charles saw Arthur before the audience did. For half a second, fear interrupted his smile. Then training returned. He welcomed his father publicly and suggested the family was grateful for his recovery. The statement attempted to absorb the threat. If Arthur appeared confused, Charles could call it illness. If Arthur accused him, Charles could call it family conflict. If Maya spoke, he could call it manipulation. The evidence had to arrive before the story could be reshaped. Elena triggered the release. Phones vibrated throughout the room. Journalists received documents. Board members received financial records. Investigators received audio files. Worker families received copies of case summaries. The screens behind Charles changed. His promotional film disappeared. A construction report appeared. The original fire-resistant materials were listed beside the cheaper substitutes approved under Charles's signature. Then came inspection warnings, payment records, photographs of blocked exits. The internal memorandum describing the Thompson family as unable to sustain legal action. The room became silent. Charles attempted to stop the projection. The system had been secured by independent technicians. Arthur stepped forward. He did not present himself as a blameless father. He acknowledged that Thomas saved his life and that he failed to protect Thomas's family afterward. He admitted trusting Charles over workers without wealth or influence. He admitted approving settlements without examining who paid the real cost. The confession mattered because it removed Charles's strongest defense. Charles could no longer claim Arthur had always supported the official story. The founder publicly identified the story as a failure of his own leadership. Then Maya stood beneath her father's photograph. She did not describe the meal. She did not describe the luxury car. She described what followed Thomas's death. The canceled education, the eviction notices, Noah's childhood shaped by fear, the letters ignored by company attorneys, the official report that called a dead man careless, while executives protected the person who approved the danger. Maya explained that Thomas did not return to the fire because he misunderstood risk. He returned because evidence mattered. He believed proof could protect people who had no access to powerful rooms. Charles interrupted. He accused Maya of exploiting tragedy. He claimed the company had already compensated the family according to law. Maya responded with a legal memorandum calculating how little they could fight. The payment was not justice. It was an estimate of their powerlessness. Luis Ramirez's widow presented the voicemail. Other workers presented testimony. An engineer confirmed that the substitute materials increased fire spread. A former security contractor admitted being ordered to remove documents after the disaster. Then the audio recording played. Charles's younger voice instructed staff to destroy the inspection copies and described Thomas as a contractor acting independently. The voice was clear, so was the date. The gala ceased being a celebration. Board members moved away from Charles. Investors called attorneys. Government officials left the front row and began speaking with investigators. Hotel employees watched from the edges of the room, uncertain whether their jobs were disappearing. Elena announced that payroll and operations would continue under temporary independent management. She also announced the creation of a protected employee transition fund using assets already frozen from Charles's private accounts. The plan prevented him from using workers as a shield. Charles attempted to leave through a side corridor. Financial investigators and police officers waited there. He was not handcuffed before the cameras immediately. Legal procedure moved carefully. But he was served with orders restricting access to company systems accounts and property. His permanent appointment as chairman was canceled before it could be announced. Arthur requested a formal board vote. Independent directors suspended Charles. The hotel he designed to prove his power became the place where that power ended. That was the beginning of the reckoning, not the end. Investigations lasted more than 2 years. The conservatory fire case reopened. Experts confirmed that cost-cutting and ignored safety warnings caused the disaster. Thomas's actions saved Arthur and helped several workers reach an exit. The official report was corrected. Thomas Thompson was no longer listed as responsible for unauthorized entry. He was recognized as a worker who identified hazards, attempted to preserve evidence, and died after rescuing others. Maya received the corrected report in a plain government envelope. She expected triumph. Instead, she cried for the afternoon her father never came home. Truth could restore a name. It could not restore the person. Charles faced charges related to fraud, evidence destruction, reckless endangerment, financial misconduct, elder abuse, and conspiracy. Some charges connected directly to the fire. Others concerned recent attempts to control Arthur and suppress evidence. His attorneys argued that he acted to protect jobs and shareholder value. The prosecution showed bonuses, private investments, and shell companies that benefited from every shortcut. Charles had not sacrificed ethics for workers. He sacrificed workers for power. Several executives cooperated. Inspectors lost licenses. A private physician admitted exaggerating Arthur's cognitive symptoms under pressure. The security contractors who abandoned Arthur identified senior staff involved. Charles's reputation collapsed before the trial ended. Hotels removed his portraits. Business schools withdrew invitations. Awards were returned. For a man who believed appearance created truth, public recognition of the truth became its own punishment. He was eventually convicted on multiple counts. The sentence included prison financial restitution and permanent restrictions on corporate leadership. Arthur did not celebrate. Charles was still his son. Love complicated justice without canceling it. Arthur testified because protecting Charles again would repeat the failure that began the story. He said fatherhood did not require hiding the harm an adult child chose to cause. Sometimes the final act of love was refusing to finance another lie. The Beaumont Company survived. Not unchanged, Arthur refused to return as permanent chairman. He believed the same family control that enabled Charles should end. The board created an independent governance structure with employee representation, safety oversight, and external review of worker complaints. Executive bonuses became connected to safety performance rather than opening deadlines alone. Confidential settlements involving injury required independent legal counseling for workers. Old cases were reviewed. Some families received additional compensation. Others received apologies and corrected records. The Beaumont Crown Hotel was transferred into a trust structure supporting worker training, safety research, and compensation. Charles intended the building to carry his name. Instead, the Central Conservatory was renamed the Thomas Thompson Garden. Maya objected at first. She feared the hotel would turn her father into decoration while continuing ordinary business. She accepted only after the trust agreement guaranteed funding for workers and gave families oversight. The garden contained no heroic statue. It displayed Thomas's tool safety reports and the names of everyone harmed in the fire. His story appeared beside the failures that made his courage necessary. Arthur offered Maya a fortune. This time he presented it as compensation rather than reward. Independent attorneys calculated what the family should have received after Thomas's death, including lost wages, educational disruption, housing instability, and deliberate suppression of the claim. Maya accepted the lawful compensation. She refused additional personal gifts. The distinction mattered. She did not want Arthur's guilt determining her life. She wanted systems to return what had been taken. Noah's education fund came from the settlement. Maya returned to design school. Other fire families received support. A portion funded legal assistance for low-income workers facing corporate pressure. Maya's story was no longer about a billionaire choosing to save her. It was about evidence forcing an institution to repay a debt. Arthur had to learn that difference. He began visiting worker families without cameras. Some refused to meet him. He accepted that. Some expressed anger. He listened without defending the company's charitable history. Some asked why Thomas mattered only after Arthur himself became vulnerable. Arthur had no satisfying answer. He admitted that power often learned empathy too late, because comfort protected it from consequences. He spent his remaining years trying to reduce that protection within the company. Maya returned to college at 25. She studied floral design, sustainable horticulture, and small business management. The first semester felt strange. She sat beside students who worried about grades, while Maya worried about NOAA legal hearings and whether the flower cart could ever become something more permanent. She was older than many classmates. Her skills were also deeper. She understood how flowers behaved in cold stations, hospital rooms, funerals, and cheap apartments with little light. Luxury hotels often treated floral design as decoration. Maya understood flowers as communication. A white chrysanthemum could protect a memory card. A bruised rose could remind someone they remained worthy of beauty. A ribbon knot could carry a father's identity across years. Her final project focused on arrangements created from imperfect flowers rejected by commercial suppliers. She used bent stems, scarred leaves, uneven blossoms, and plants recovering from damage. The exhibition was called Still Worth Arranging. It received attention beyond the school. Several hotels offered Maya jobs. She declined most of them. She accepted a small space inside the Beaumont Crown under a lease owned by the Worker Trust, not the Beaumont family. The shop was named Thomas and Maya Flowers. Noah suggested adding his name. Maya laughed and told him he needed to finish school first. The shop employed young women from shelters, foster care, and low-income neighborhoods. Many lacked formal experience. Maya paid them during training. She remembered unpaid trials and interviews where clothes mattered more than talent. No applicant was rejected because they did not understand luxury etiquette. They learned design budgeting, customer service, and business law. Maya wanted kindness to become a structure, not an occasional gesture that exhausted the giver. The shop also maintained a free flower program. Each week, imperfect but usable flowers went to hospitals, funeral homes, serving poor families, elder care centers, and shelters. The program included meals through a partnership with local restaurants. Maya insisted that people needed food before symbolism, but sometimes both mattered. The first bouquet made every morning was placed beneath Thomas's photograph. The photograph showed him tying a ribbon around a young plant. Beside it rested the replacement badge issued after the company corrected his employment record. The original badge stolen from Maya's apartment was recovered during the investigation. It had been found inside a security contractor's evidence bag. Maya displayed that one too. Its dented surface carried years of misunderstanding. It proved Thomas belonged to the company history Charles tried to erase. Noah grew into a thoughtful young man. For years, he believed Maya's sacrifices were simply part of being his sister. As he matured, he understood what she had postponed. He felt guilty. Maya refused to let guilt become his identity. She explained that raising him had been her choice after impossible circumstances. The injustice came from the lack of support, not from his existence. Noah studied engineering with a focus on building safety. He said the decision had nothing to do with the fire. Everyone knew it did. He interned with the Independent Safety Council created after the Beaumont reforms. Years later, he helped develop low-cost fire monitoring systems for small businesses and public housing. Thomas's final struggle moved into both children's futures without controlling them completely. Arthur became a regular visitor to the flower shop. At first, employees became nervous whenever he entered. He remained a wealthy, famous man even after leaving leadership. Maya refused to treat him as royalty. He waited in line. He paid ordinary prices. He carried his own purchases. Sometimes he helped move boxes, though age limited him. Their relationship developed slowly. Maya did not call him family immediately. She did not excuse his silence because he exposed Charles later. Arthur had allowed the original injustice. His remorse became meaningful only through sustained action. He attended compensation meetings. He supported independent oversight even when it reduced the value of his remaining shares. He testified against former executives. He transferred control of several charitable funds to community boards. He stopped placing the Beaumont name on every donation. Maya watched. Trust arrived through repetition. One winter morning, Arthur entered the shop wearing a simple gray coat. Snow had begun falling outside. He carried 2 paper containers of food. The sight reminded Maya of Westbridge Station. Arthur purchased 1 white chrysanthemum. Maya tied the ribbon using Thomas's knot. Then she gave Arthur one of the meals and kept the other for herself. This time, neither was hungry enough to need rescue. They ate beside the shop window while hotel guests passed. The moment felt ordinary. That was what made it healing. Arthur had once been a man beneath rain, hiding evidence inside a flower. Maya had once been a girl with only 1 meal. Now they sat inside a business built from corrected truth rather than charity. Arthur admitted that the food tasted better than the meal she gave him at the station. Maya knew it did not. Hunger had made the first meal unforgettable. The press continued telling the story for years. Some versions remained shallow. A poor flower seller fed a homeless billionaire and received a luxury future. Maya corrected the story whenever possible. She explained that Arthur did not reward her because kindness deserved wealth. He returned to the truth because Thomas deserved justice. She helped Arthur when she believed he had nothing. That revealed her character. It did not create his responsibility. Justice was not a prize. Justice was a debt. That distinction became central to Maya's public work. She spoke at business schools, worker centers, and design programs. She told young entrepreneurs not to build companies that depended on invisible sacrifice. She told charitable organizations to ask whether their generosity repaired harm or simply improved the donor's image. She told audiences that poor people did not need to perform extraordinary goodness before receiving fair treatment. A mother should not need to save a billionaire to keep housing. A worker should not need to die heroically to have safety complaints believed. A girl should not need to surrender her last meal before anyone notices she is hungry too. Her words made some wealthy audiences uncomfortable. Maya did not consider comfort a measure of truth. The landlord who attempted to evict Maya and Noah was later investigated for accepting payment from a company connected to Charles. He had agreed to accelerate eviction in exchange for a property purchase. The sale was canceled. Tenants formed a housing cooperative using legal support from the worker fund. Maya did not return to the apartment. She helped ensure others were not displaced. The station manager who canceled her permit invited her to reopen the flower cart after public opinion changed. Maya declined the offer at first. Then she negotiated. The permit program was revised to provide affordable spaces for small vendors. Security officers received training on homelessness and crisis response. A food distribution shelf was created near the station entrance in partnership with local businesses. Only after those changes did Maya return with a new cart. The cart was operated by trainees from her shop. Each evening, unsold flowers and meals were offered without requiring identification or explanation. The security guard who once removed Arthur became one of the volunteers. He apologized to Maya. He admitted that station policies rewarded removal rather than care. Maya accepted the apology after watching him show up week after week. As with Arthur, change required repetition. The white chrysanthemum became a recognizable symbol. Maya resisted turning it into a luxury brand. She allowed the image to represent the Worker Justice Fund. But no one could sell expensive products using the symbol without contributing to housing, food, or legal aid. The flower that protected evidence remained connected to practical support. Arthur's health declined gradually. Years of stress, poor treatment during confinement, and age weakened his heart. He remained mentally clear. Near the end of his life, he asked Maya to visit the original Beaumont Estate greenhouse. The structure had been restored after the old fire damaged part of the property. Thomas once worked there before the resort conservatory project. Arthur brought a box of records. Inside were photographs, payroll notes, and a letter Thomas wrote before the fire. The letter described the unsafe materials and requested protection for workers who feared retaliation. At the bottom, Thomas added a personal note. He said Arthur had built something impressive, but risked becoming too distant from the people who kept it alive. He warned that a company could look like a family from the top while feeling like a machine from below. Arthur had never received the letter. Charles's office intercepted it. Maya read the words beneath the greenhouse glass. Her father's voice seemed present in the careful handwriting. He had understood the Beaumont Empire better than its founder. Arthur asked Maya to preserve the letter in the worker archive. He did not ask her to forgive him again. By then, forgiveness had become less important than responsibility. Maya had released enough anger to continue living, but she never removed the truth from their relationship. Arthur respected that. He died the following spring. His final will placed most of his remaining company shares into the Employee and Community Trust. Charles received only what law required after compensation claims and penalties. Arthur left Maya no private fortune. That had been her request. He left her Thomas's letter, the original conservatory plans, and the white chrysanthemum preserved inside a glass frame. The flower had lost almost all color. The ribbon remained green. Maya placed it in the shop archive beside the memory card. Arthur's funeral drew political leaders, business executives, employees, and worker families. Maya attended with Noah. She did not speak about the meal first. She spoke about correction. Arthur's life included ambition, blindness, failure, remorse, and repair. Reducing him to either billionaire savior or guilty founder would hide the difficult truth. He had created an empire that harmed people. He had also used his remaining power to change it after confronting what his silence enabled. Redemption did not erase the first truth. The first truth did not make the later work meaningless. Human accountability required holding both. Charles appealed his conviction multiple times. He continued claiming Arthur had been manipulated by outsiders. He described Maya as the person who destroyed the Beaumont family. Maya never responded directly. The family had been damaged long before she entered it. She did not destroy the lie. She carried evidence into a room where the lie could no longer survive. Charles spent years in prison watching the company operate under rules he once considered weakness. Safety spending increased. Worker retention improved. Profits stabilized after the scandal. The reforms he claimed would destroy the company made it more durable. That was another form of poetic justice. Charles built power by treating care as inefficiency. The institution succeeded after removing him and valuing the people he considered replaceable. The Beaumont crown became known less for luxury than for its labor model. Tourists still visited the glass lobby and indoor garden, but employees guided interested guests through the Thomas Thompson exhibit. The tour did not romanticize the fire. It explained the material substitutions, ignored warnings, legal manipulation, and reforms that followed. Business leaders sometimes asked why the hotel displayed such an embarrassing history. The worker board answered that concealment had caused the disaster. Transparency was part of safety. Maya's flower shop expanded into a training studio. Graduates opened businesses of their own. One specialized in funeral flowers for families with limited money. Another created gardens in women's shelters. A former foster youth became the hotel's head floral designer. She once lacked the clothes considered professional enough for an interview. Under the new hiring system, portfolios and paid trials replaced appearance-based judgment. Maya watched young women enter doors that closed against her. She did not claim personal credit for every success. The goal of structural repair was that opportunity no longer depended on one person's favor. Noah completed his engineering degree. At graduation, he carried Thomas's recovered badge inside his jacket. Maya sat in the front row. She remembered buying food she could not eat, hiding eviction notices, and telling a child that everything would be fine. Everything had not become fine through luck. It became different through truth, legal work, community, organization, and choices repeated over years. After graduation, Noah did not join Beaumont. He created an independent safety cooperative serving small contractors and worker-owned businesses. He wanted no family's protection to depend on the integrity of one corporate leader. Maya supported the decision. She had learned not to confuse proximity to power with security. Years passed. The apartment building where Maya and Noah once lived became part of the housing cooperative. The one-room unit was converted into emergency housing for young guardians raising siblings. Maya visited once. The cracked lamp was gone. The curtain dividing the room had been removed. Fresh paint covered the walls. A 20-year-old woman lived there with two younger brothers. She sold handmade jewelry and attended evening classes. Maya left groceries and flowers through the cooperative office without attaching her name. She understood the temptation to create a dramatic moment of generosity. She also understood that dignity sometimes preferred privacy. The old flower cart from Westbridge Station eventually retired. Maya kept it in the training studio. The wheels were uneven. Rain had warped one wooden side. Faint letters still read, Maya's flowers. Students asked why she did not restore it. Maya said the damage belonged to the history. The cart showed where the business began, not as a romantic symbol of entrepreneurship, but as evidence of work performed without security. Beside the cart hung the rejection letter from the Beaumont Hotel. The letter said Maya lacked the qualifications and presentation required for the position. Under it hung a photograph of the floral studio she later created inside the same hotel. Maya did not display the pairing to humiliate the hiring manager. She displayed it to remind students that rejection often measured access rather than potential. Still, she taught them not to wait for institutions to discover their value. They learned contracts, pricing, savings, and cooperative ownership. Talent deserved protection. Kindness did too. Maya's greatest challenge after success was learning not to give until she disappeared. For years, she believed love meant surrendering meals, education, sleep, and opportunity. Her generosity had been praised publicly after Arthur's return. People expected her to remain endlessly selfless. She began receiving thousands of requests. Some were genuine. Some were manipulative. At first, she tried to answer everything. Exhaustion returned. A counselor reminded her that the act that changed her life came from free choice, not permanent obligation. Giving one meal did not require becoming food for everyone. Maya built systems instead. She funded programs through transparent budgets. She hired staff. She rested. She allowed others to help. That personal boundary became part of the moral she shared. Kindness, without structure, could consume the kind person while leaving the cause unchanged. The goal was not to create saints who survived on nothing. The goal was to create communities where fewer people reached the point of having only one meal. On the 10th anniversary of the Beaumont Crown opening, the hotel held a public gathering in the Thomas Thompson Garden. Workers, families, trainees, engineers, and guests filled the space. The indoor trees had grown tall beneath the glass roof. Sunlight crossed the floor where Charles once expected applause. Maya stood beside Noah beneath their father's photograph. The corrected safety report rested in the archive. The Worker Fund had supported thousands of families. The flower program delivered arrangements and meals across the city. The company remained profitable under shared oversight. No single outcome erased Thomas's death, but his truth had changed what followed. Maya carried the preserved chrysanthemum to the center of the exhibit. The petals were almost transparent. A museum specialist had advised replacing it with a replica because the original would continue fading. Maya refused. The flower's fragility was part of its meaning. It had never been valuable because it could last forever. It mattered because it served its purpose at the right moment. It gave dignity to a hungry man. It concealed evidence. It connected two lives shaped by the same hidden crime. Then it faded, as flowers do. The impact remained. Maya spoke briefly. She reminded the audience that the story often began in public memory with her giving away dinner. For her, it began much earlier. It began when workers raised concerns and leaders ignored them. It began when Thomas taught his daughter a ribbon knot. It began when Charles decided deadlines mattered more than safety. It began when attorneys calculated that a poor family could not fight. The meal did not create justice. It opened a path through which buried truth returned. People needed to remember the full sequence. Otherwise, the comforting miracle would replace the structural lesson. After the gathering, Maya walked alone through Westbridge Station. The station had changed. New kiosks stood near the entrance. A mural showed local vendors and commuters. The food shelf remained stocked. A young woman operated the flower cart. Near the awning where Arthur once sat, an older man rested beneath a clean blanket provided by the outreach team. Maya purchased 2 meals. She gave one to him and kept one. They ate separately beneath the same roof. No luxury car arrived the next morning. No secret identity emerged. No hidden evidence appeared. The act remained worthwhile. That was the truth Maya valued most. Kindness did not become meaningful only when the person receiving it turned out to be rich. Arthur's wealth made the consequences dramatic. His hunger made the moment human. Had he been an ordinary homeless man with no empire, the meal would still have mattered. The flower would still have told him he was seen. Maya built her life around that principle. Human worth should never depend on a later revelation. The stranger might be a billionaire. He might be a father, a veteran, a patient, a worker, or simply a person whose name no one remembered. Need was enough. At the same time, Maya rejected stories that placed the burden of compassion only on individuals. She had helped Arthur because institutions failed him in that moment. But no society should rely on exhausted flower sellers to feed the hungry, while powerful systems remain unchanged. Personal goodness could begin a response. Justice required more. Housing, healthcare, worker safety, legal access, accountable leadership. Those changes became Arthur's real repayment. Not the car, not the money, not the hotel shop, the structures that made future harm harder. Maya grew older. Gray appeared in her hair earlier than she expected. Years of worry had left marks around her eyes. She did not hide them. She spent less time arranging flowers and more time teaching. Her hands still remembered every knot. When students struggled with fragile stems, Maya showed them how Thomas crossed the ribbon twice and folded one end beneath the other. She explained that support should hold without crushing. The lesson applied to more than flowers. Arthur had tried to help through money that could have crushed independence. Maya helped him learn another method. Noah had needed protection that allowed him to grow rather than remain a child. Workers needed systems strong enough to support them without controlling their voices. A good knot held the stem upright while leaving room for life. The students remembered the metaphor. Some repeated it in businesses far from the Beaumont Hotel. Thomas's technique traveled through hands he never met. That became another kind of legacy. Near the end of Maya's career, a journalist asked what she would change if she could return to the night at the station. Maya thought about the cold, the unsold flowers, the empty stomach, and the old man beneath the awning. She would still give him the meal, but she would no longer lie to Noah about being hungry. She would tell someone they were facing eviction. She would ask for help before everything reached crisis. At 24, Maya believed strength meant protecting others from the knowledge of her needs. Years taught her that secrecy could become a private prison. Receiving care did not reduce kindness. It allowed kindness to continue. That answer surprised the journalist. People preferred a perfect heroine. Maya offered a human one. She had been generous and frightened, brave and exhausted, suspicious of Arthur and willing to work beside him, angry at the Beaumont family and committed to repairing the institution rather than destroying innocent livelihoods. She had not made every decision correctly. She had simply refused to sell the truth for comfort. That was enough. The black luxury car from that first morning eventually entered the Beaumont archive. It had become famous through photographs outside Maya's poor apartment. Maya opposed displaying it at first. The car represented spectacle more than substance. The archive placed it beside the flower cart. Visitors saw the contrast. One machine represented inherited wealth. The other represented survival. But the exhibit explained that neither object revealed character on its own. Arthur arrived in luxury after being fed in poverty. Maya entered the car without surrendering judgment. Objects showed conditions. Choices showed people. Inside the car display rested no designer accessories, only the cream-colored box, the wilted chrysanthemum, and the memory card. The smallest items held the largest truth. Charles once believed power lived in towers, contracts private security, and controlled headlines. Thomas understood power could also live in copied records. Arthur learned it could survive inside a flower stem. Maya proved it could stand inside a young woman who had almost nothing left to lose. The hotel Charles built remained standing. His name did not. The garden he used as decoration became a memorial to the worker he blamed. The company he tried to own became partially governed by employees. The poor family he considered unable to fight changed the rules of the empire. That was poetic justice. Not because Charles became poor, because the people he treated as invisible became impossible to remove from the record. Maya never forgot the meal. It was the last meal she owned that night. It was also the last time she believed survival had to be carried alone. The next morning, the luxury car seemed like the beginning of a miracle. Years later, she understood that miracles were often stories people told after many difficult choices had been simplified. The car did not save her. Truth opened the door. Evidence kept it open. Workers walked through together. Arthur surrendered control. Maya demanded justice instead of charity. Lawyers, investigators, engineers, families, and employees built the rest. The story became powerful because kindness connected the right people at the right moment. It became meaningful because they used that connection to change more than one life. So remember Maya, whenever generosity appears small, a meal can keep someone alive long enough to speak. A flower can protect what powerful people want destroyed. A ribbon knot can reveal a connection hidden for years. But also remember that kindness is not payment for justice. No one should have to prove exceptional goodness before receiving what was always theirs. Thomas deserved his name cleared, whether Maya fed Arthur or not. The workers deserved safety, whether their families inspired public sympathy or not. Maya and Noah deserved compensation because the company harmed them, not because Maya became admirable in the eyes of strangers. The meal revealed her heart. The evidence revealed the crime. Justice required both compassion and truth, but they served different purposes. 1 year after Arthur first entered the flower shop as a customer, Maya began a tradition. On the first snowy evening of every winter, the shop prepared hot meals and single white chrysanthemums. Volunteers carried them to stations, shelters, hospitals, and overnight buses. No cameras followed. No names were collected. The flowers carried no promotional card, only a green ribbon tied with Thomas's knot. Some recipients ate immediately. Some kept the flowers. Some ignored them. The act required no future story. Maya understood that the world might never know what happened after each offering. That uncertainty did not make the gesture smaller. Her father had taught her that kindness often disappeared from the giver's view while continuing inside another life. Arthur carried one meal into a struggle against his own son. A homeless veteran might carry another into the next morning. A frightened teenager might keep the flower beside a shelter bed. A grieving nurse might place it beneath a photograph. Not every act changed an empire. Every act changed a moment. Sometimes a moment was the only part of time a person needed help surviving. On the final wall of Thomas and Maya flowers hung 3 images. The first showed Thomas inside the conservatory, alive and smiling. The second showed Maya beside her station cart on a rainy evening. The third showed the Thomas Thompson garden, filled with workers and their families. Between the images was the preserved flower. Below it were words Maya chose carefully. Kindness opened the door. Truth crossed the threshold. Justice changed the house. That was the complete story. A flower girl gave a homeless man her last meal. The next morning, a luxury car stopped outside her home. But the wealth inside that car was not the real reward. The real reward was learning that her father had been brave, not careless. It was returning his name to the truth. It was forcing power to repay families it once dismissed. It was protecting workers from the same danger. It was watching Noah graduate. It was building a business where talent mattered more than appearance. It was teaching young women that generosity did not require self-erasure. And it was seeing Arthur become more than the billionaire who failed her family. He became a man willing to face what his success had hidden. Maya never became part of the Beaumont family by blood. She became part of Arthur's life through accountability, conflict, and mutual change. Near the end, he treated her not as the poor girl who rescued him, but as the person who taught him what repair required. She treated him not as a billionaire who transformed her future, but as a flawed man who finally chose truth over legacy. That was a better bond than gratitude. Gratitude could become debt. Truth allowed equality. Years later, when Maya tied a ribbon around the final bouquet of her career, her hands moved exactly as Thomas taught them. Twice across, left beneath right, tight enough to hold, gentle enough not to bruise. She placed the bouquet beneath her father's photograph. Then she closed the shop for the evening and walked through the hotel garden. Workers greeted her by name. No one knew who would have been present if Thomas had lived. Perhaps he would have become a senior grounds director. Perhaps Maya would have completed school earlier. Perhaps Noah would have remembered more than photographs. The life they lost remained impossible to measure. Maya no longer tried to turn justice into replacement. Some things could only be mourned. But mourning did not prevent building. The greenhouse lights reflected across leaves and glass. Near the entrance stood a plaque listing the workers who died in the fire. Thomas Thompson's name appeared among them. Below the names was a statement acknowledging that safety warnings had been ignored and evidence concealed. No heroic language softened the truth. Maya touched her father's name. Then she continued walking. Outside, snow had begun to fall. At the curb, no luxury car waited. She took the city bus home. The ordinary ride felt like freedom. Her life had changed, but she no longer measured change by expensive vehicles, hotel rooms, or public recognition. She measured it by choices. Noah safe. Workers heard. Students paid. Families compensated. Flowers given freely. Meals shared without anyone going hungry alone. That was the wealth Maya understood. And every winter, somewhere beneath a station awning, a person received a warm container of food and a white flower tied with green ribbon. Most never knew the story behind the nut. They did not need to. The kindness reached them without conditions, just as it had reached Arthur Beaumont on the night everyone else walked past.
You were never promised this contract. The stain existed before Emily entered this room.
This is being twisted against me.
And the other workers? Were they all misunderstandings too? Do you want to answer her? Or should the evidence continue? Whitmore International is canceling the ambassador contract.
They used a private mistake to destroy me.
Show them where it began.
Who allowed a street vendor into my ballroom? Look at what she's done. I was told to carry them through the side corridor.
The first flower hit the marble floor just as Vanessa Cole stepped into the center of the ballroom. It was a pale white camellia, delicate enough to bruise beneath a careless finger, and for one brief second, no one noticed it. The guests were too busy turning toward Vanessa. Cameras flashed, music rose, assistants hurried to clear her path. Every movement inside the Grand Meridian Hotel seemed arranged around the arrival of the woman whose face had appeared on magazine covers, luxury billboards, and fashion campaigns across 3 continents. Then the rest of the flowers slipped from Emily Carter's arms. White camellias, soft pink roses, and narrow branches of silver-green leaves scattered across the polished floor. A glass vase struck the edge of a display table, cracked, and released a thin stream of water toward Vanessa's shoes. The ballroom became silent. Emily stood frozen beside the ruined arrangement, wearing a faded black dress and a borrowed pair of shoes that were half a size too large. Her hands were red from carrying buckets through the cold morning air. A strand of dark hair had escaped the simple knot behind her head. She looked exactly like what most of the guests believed she was, a poor flower seller who had wandered too close to people more important than herself. Vanessa looked down at the water near her silver heels. Then she looked at Emily. The expression on her face changed so quickly that several cameras captured it before she remembered to smile. The polished warmth disappeared. In its place came disgust. Vanessa had spent years learning how to appear gracious in public. She knew when to lower her voice, when to touch a fan's shoulder, when to laugh at a reporter's joke, and when to speak about kindness as though she had invented it. Her public image had been built around elegance, discipline, and compassion. But Vanessa's kindness had conditions. It existed when cameras were pointed directly at her, and when the person in front of her had influence, money, or a useful audience. It disappeared around drivers, cleaners, assistants, waiters, and anyone whose name would never appear beside hers in a headline. Emily belonged to that invisible group. Vanessa demanded to know who had allowed a street vendor into the ballroom. Emily tried to explain that she had not entered without permission. The event manager had ordered 12 floral arrangements from the small shop where she worked, and the final display had been delayed because the hotel loading entrance was blocked. She had been told to carry it through the side corridor. Vanessa did not listen. She stepped away from the water, as though Emily had spilled something poisonous. Then she noticed a faint mark near the lower edge of her gown. The mark had already been there. One of Vanessa's assistants had seen it during the fitting that morning. A loose cosmetic container had stained the inner layer of the fabric, and the styling team had positioned the folds to hide it. Vanessa had blamed the assistant and threatened to have her removed after the event. Now Emily had given her a better target. Vanessa pointed toward the stain and accused the flower seller of destroying a gown worth more than Emily would earn in years. The people nearest them knew the water had never touched the fabric. No one said anything. A hotel manager rushed forward and apologized to Vanessa. He did not examine the dress. He did not ask what had happened. He simply understood that one woman could damage the hotel's reputation while the other could not. Emily knelt to gather the flowers. Her fingers trembled. Vanessa told her to stop. She wanted everyone to see what careless people did when they entered places where they did not belong. She demanded that Emily pick up each flower slowly and apologize before touching it. Then she insisted that the hotel remove her from the event and charge her for the gown. A few guests looked uncomfortable. Most looked entertained. Several lifted their phones. No one noticed the elderly woman standing beside the far wall. She wore a plain gray coat over a dark dress, practical shoes, and a narrow scarf tied at her throat. Her silver hair was pinned neatly behind her head. One hand rested on a wooden cane. The other held an untouched cup of tea. She did not look wealthy. She did not look powerful. She looked like someone's grandmother who had arrived too early and been forgotten by the staff. But she was watching everything. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore, and before the evening ended, she would decide whether Vanessa Cole's career continued at all. Emily gathered the first camellia from the floor. Its petals had been crushed beneath the wheel of a lighting case. She placed it carefully into the broken vase as though it could still be saved. Humiliation has a way of making time move differently. A few minutes can feel longer than an entire year. Every sound becomes sharp. Every glance feels permanent. Emily heard the clicks of cameras, the whispers among guests, and the nervous breathing of the event assistant beside her. She felt the marble against her knees and knew the fabric of her dress was absorbing the spilled water. Vanessa continued speaking above her. She described carelessness as a sign of poor upbringing. She suggested that people who handled expensive things should know their place. She warned the hotel manager that allowing untrained workers near high-profile guests could destroy the event. Emily did not defend herself again. She had learned long ago that explanations rarely helped when a powerful person had already decided what kind of story they wanted. At 22, Emily had experienced enough difficult rooms to recognize one that had no interest in truth. Her mother, Rose Carter, had been seriously ill for nearly 4 years. Medical bills consumed most of the family's income. Emily's younger brother, Noah, was 17 and preparing for university entrance exams. Their father had died when Noah was 9, leaving behind an unpaid mortgage, a small flower shop, and a family that had to become practical before it finished grieving. Emily worked from dawn until late evening. She bought flowers from wholesale markets before sunrise, trimmed stems in a refrigerated room, delivered arrangements across the city, and sold simple bouquets near train stations when the shop had no large orders. At night, she reviewed Noah's applications, organized Rose's medication, and practiced floral design through free online lessons. She did not consider herself unfortunate. She considered herself busy. Poverty had never embarrassed her. Being treated as though poverty made her less human did. Vanessa ordered Emily to look at her while apologizing. Emily lifted her eyes. For a moment, Vanessa seemed disappointed. She had expected fear, perhaps tears. What she saw instead was pain, held carefully behind dignity. That dignity made Vanessa crueler. She demanded Emily's name and employment details. She said she would ensure the flower shop never worked with a hotel again. She wanted the cost of the gown deducted from Emily's wages. The amount she mentioned was greater than the shop's entire annual profit. The hotel manager agreed before checking whether he had the authority. Emily looked toward the arrangement she had carried. The flowers had been selected that morning for more than decoration. The hotel had requested something distinctive for the Whitmore International Anniversary event. Emily had used white camellias because they represented quiet strength. She added old garden roses for memory and silver leaves for endurance. It was not a random collection. It told a story about beauty surviving difficult seasons. No one in the ballroom knew that. No one, except the elderly woman by the wall. Eleanor recognized the arrangement immediately. Nearly 50 years earlier, before Whitmore International became one of the most influential fashion companies in the world, Eleanor had used the same combination of flowers during her first independent show. She had no money for elaborate sets. A young florist named Rose had collected leftover camellias from a market and arranged them around the runway with branches cut from her own garden. The photographs from that show later became part of fashion history. The arrangement was never publicly credited. Only Eleanor and Rose knew what it meant. Now, in a ballroom filled with expensive designers and carefully planned luxury, the same floral language had appeared in the hands of a young woman being forced to her knees. Eleanor set down her tea. Before she could move, a photographer named Arthur Bell stepped beside her. Arthur had worked in fashion for more than 40 years. His hair had turned white, but his memory remained sharp. He recognized Eleanor. His eyes widened. She gave him a small gesture, asking him to remain silent. Arthur understood. Eleanor had entered the hotel without announcing herself because she wanted to see the event before everyone began performing for her. Whitmore International was preparing to select a new global ambassador. Vanessa Cole was the leading candidate. The agreement would place her at the center of the company's campaigns for 3 years and make her one of the highest-paid models in the industry. Vanessa believed the contract was already hers. She had told reporters that the announcement would confirm what the fashion world already knew. She had instructed assistants to refer to her as the future face of Whitmore. She had even rejected another campaign because she expected the new deal to make it unnecessary. Eleanor had not approved the final contract. She had spent her life watching talented people become worse when they believed success was guaranteed. For that reason, she sometimes arrived anonymously before major decisions. She watched how candidates treated employees who could do nothing for them. Vanessa had already failed several times that evening. She had insulted a waiter for bringing the wrong glass. She had ordered a young assistant to stand in the cold loading corridor because a garment bag had wrinkled. She had mocked a hotel cleaner's accent. Each time, Vanessa changed when someone important approached. Her face softened. Her voice became warm. She thanked photographers and praised the staff. Eleanor had seen enough to doubt her. Then Emily dropped the flowers. What followed removed every doubt. The hotel manager ordered 2 security employees to escort Emily out. Vanessa insisted that Emily leave through the main lobby rather than the service entrance. She wanted the guests to see her removed. Emily stood carefully. The water had soaked the lower half of her dress. She gathered the broken vase and damaged flowers into her arms. One of the rose stems cut her palm, leaving a thin line of blood across her skin. No one offered a cloth. As security approached, a small card fell from Emily's pocket. It landed near Eleanor's shoe. Eleanor bent slowly and picked it up. The card was handmade from thick recycled paper. On one side, it carried the words, "Carter Flowers." On the other was Emily's name, a telephone number, and a tiny drawing of a chameleon. Eleanor kept the card. Emily was escorted through the ballroom. People moved aside as though humiliation were contagious. Several guests continued filming. Vanessa returned to the cameras and transformed herself again. She smiled sadly and suggested that unfortunate incidents should not distract from the celebration. Within minutes, the music resumed. The flowers remained broken near the wall. Eleanor looked at them for a long time. Outside the ballroom, Emily tried to control her breathing. The security guards were not cruel. They seemed embarrassed by the order. One of them offered to carry the vase, but Emily refused. She did not want anyone else blamed for helping her. The event manager followed and demanded the flower shop's insurance details. He warned that the hotel would seek compensation for the gown and the disruption. Emily knew the shop had no insurance large enough to cover such a claim. She also knew losing the hotel contract could close the business. The shop had survived only because Rose still knew many long-term customers. But illness had kept her from working, and newer competitors were taking most of the large events. The Grand Meridian order was supposed to cover 2 months of medication. Now it might destroy them. Emily was taken to the service corridor and told to wait while the manager prepared a report. She sat on an overturned crate beside the loading entrance. The cut in her palm continued bleeding. For the first time that evening, she allowed herself to cry. Not because Vanessa had called her poor, not because strangers had filmed her on the floor. She cried because she had promised her mother that the hotel order would help them breathe for a while. She had told Noah not to worry about his application fees. She had believed one beautiful arrangement might lead to more opportunities. A few careless seconds had turned hope into debt. Emily pressed a cloth around her hand. Then she heard someone fall in the corridor. An elderly hotel seamstress named Maria had collapsed near the costume storage area. She had been working since early morning, repairing gowns and adjusting uniforms. The heat inside the narrow room, combined with missed medication, had made her dizzy. Several employees gathered, but did not know what to do. Emily stood immediately. She forgot the ruined arrangement, the hotel manager, and Vanessa's threats. She crossed the corridor, checked Maria's breathing, loosened the tight fabric around her neck, and asked someone to bring water. When Maria regained consciousness, Emily found her medication inside a handbag and confirmed the correct instructions before helping her sit upright. The hotel manager returned and ordered Emily to stay away. She ignored him until Maria was stable. Eleanor watched from the corner of the corridor. She had followed quietly after the ballroom resumed. She saw Emily kneeling again, but this time not because someone had forced her. She was kneeling to help a woman no one important had noticed. The contrast was complete. Inside the ballroom, Vanessa had used power to make someone smaller. Outside, Emily used what little she had to protect someone weaker. Eleanor approached Maria and asked whether she was well. The hotel manager turned toward the elderly woman and told her the service corridor was restricted. He did not recognize her. Eleanor asked whether employees were normally left without medical support during events. The manager became impatient. He said the matter was under control and suggested she return to the guest area. Emily looked at Eleanor. There was something familiar in the older woman's face, though she could not place it. Eleanor asked Emily where she learned to arrange camellias in that particular pattern. Emily explained that her mother had taught her. Rose believed every bouquet should carry a memory, even when the person buying it never understood the meaning. Eleanor's grip tightened around her cane. She asked for Rose's full name. When Emily answered, decades collapsed into a single moment. Eleanor had not heard the name Rose Carter in 31 years. She asked where Rose was now. Emily said her mother was at home and had been ill for several years. Eleanor looked toward the damaged flowers in Emily's arms. She understood then that the arrangement was not imitation. It was inheritance. Rose had passed the language of flowers to her daughter. Before Eleanor could ask more, the hotel manager returned with documents. He told Emily to sign an acknowledgement accepting responsibility for the gown. Emily read the page. It stated that she had acted carelessly, caused damage, disrupted the event, and agreed to reimburse the hotel and Vanessa's agency. None of that had been established. Emily refused to sign. The manager warned that refusal would make the situation worse. Eleanor asked whether the ballroom cameras had recorded the incident. The manager said security footage was confidential. Eleanor asked whether anyone had examined the gown before blaming Emily. Again, the manager dismissed her. He assumed she was an ordinary guest, involving herself in a matter beyond her importance. Eleanor did not reveal who she was. She simply told Emily not to sign anything until the evidence had been reviewed. The manager demanded to know who had given her authority. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. Then she said authority was not always visible when it entered a room. The manager laughed nervously and walked away. Emily did not understand the statement. She thanked the older woman anyway. Eleanor asked for permission to visit Rose. Emily hesitated. Her mother was private and easily exhausted, but the emotion in Eleanor's face seemed genuine. She did not look curious. She looked afraid of having found something too late. Emily gave her the address. Then the hotel manager returned with a different order. Vanessa's agency wanted Emily removed from the property immediately. The legal paperwork would be delivered to the flower shop the following day. Emily left through the loading entrance. She carried the broken flowers with her. Eleanor remained behind. Inside the ballroom, Vanessa was posing beside a gold Whitmore International logo. She had recovered completely from the incident. She smiled as reporters asked about the anticipated ambassador contract. She described the company as a symbol of timeless values. Eleanor listened from the edge of the room. Timeless values. The phrase almost made her angry enough to reveal herself immediately. But Eleanor had built an empire by understanding the difference between anger and action. Anger desired a moment. Action required evidence. She found Arthur Bell and asked whether he had photographed the incident. He had. Several images showed the water flowing away from Vanessa's gown. One photograph captured the stain before the flowers fell. Another showed Vanessa's assistant examining the same mark 20 minutes earlier. Arthur had also recorded part of the confrontation. Eleanor asked him to secure every file and share nothing until she gave permission. Then she contacted Whitmore International's legal director. She requested all hotel security footage, backstage recordings, employment records, and communications involving Vanessa's agency. She also postponed the ambassador announcement without informing Vanessa. By the time the event reached its scheduled dinner, an investigation had already begun. Vanessa knew none of this. She believed Emily had disappeared. People like Emily usually did. They were embarrassed, threatened, and removed. Their absence allowed powerful people to continue without examining what they had done. Vanessa returned to her table and complained that the evening had been emotionally exhausting. Her agent assured her the flower seller would be handled. The agent, Celeste Grant, had managed Vanessa for 6 years. She knew about the cruelty. She had paid assistants to remain silent, threatened employees with legal action, and convinced brands that complaints came from jealous workers. Vanessa's public image was valuable, and Celeste treated every damaged person as an expense to be controlled. She expected the Grand Meridian to cooperate. The hotel expected Whitmore International to protect the event. Everyone assumed the poorest person involved would carry the consequences. That assumption had worked many times before. This time, Eleanor Whitmore was watching. Emily returned home after midnight. The Carter Flower Shop occupied the ground floor of an old brick building. The family lived in 2 small rooms above it. The shop sign had faded, paint peeled from the window frame. Buckets of unsold flowers stood near the entrance, their petals beginning to soften. Rose was awake. She sat beside the kitchen window with a blanket around her shoulders. Illness had changed her face, but not her eyes. They remained bright, observant, and capable of seeing what Emily tried to hide. Emily had planned to say the event went well. Then Rose saw the wet dress, the cut hand, and the broken flowers. Emily told her everything. She described the fall, Vanessa's accusations, the guests filming the hotel's threat, and the elderly woman who had asked about Rose. At the mention of Eleanor's name, Rose stopped breathing for a moment. Emily noticed. She asked whether they knew each other. Rose turned toward the dark window. For years, she had told Emily only part of her past. Before marrying Emily's father, Rose had worked as a floral artist in London, Paris, and Milan. She had designed arrangements for small fashion shows, private homes, and theater productions. But she always described that life as distant and unimportant. Now she admitted that Eleanor Whitmore had once been her closest friend. They met when both were 19. Eleanor was designing clothing in the back room of a tailor's shop. Rose sold flowers at a market nearby. Neither had money. Neither belonged to the wealthy world they hoped to enter. They spent nights planning shows that did not exist, and mornings searching for discarded materials. Rose understood color and shape in a way that transformed Eleanor's work. She arranged flowers around garments, suggested natural dyes, and created the camellia pattern later associated with Whitmore's first collection. They built the beginning together. Then success arrived. Investors became interested. Wealthy clients appeared. Eleanor's name moved to the front, while Rose remained invisible behind arrangements, fabrics, and temporary contracts. At first, Rose accepted it. Eleanor promised that once the company stabilized, they would formalize the partnership. Before that happened, a design portfolio disappeared. The portfolio contained sketches for a collection inspired by flowers Rose's mother had grown. Weeks later, similar designs appeared under another company's name. Eleanor believed Rose had sold them. Rose denied it. An investor presented documents suggesting she had accepted payment. The friendship collapsed. Rose left the city. She later discovered that the investor had arranged the theft to separate them. He wanted control over Eleanor and considered Rose an obstacle. By the time Rose found evidence, Eleanor had signed contracts, placing the company under his influence. Rose wrote several letters. None received an answer. She assumed Eleanor had chosen ambition over friendship. Eleanor assumed Rose had betrayed her. Years became decades. Rose married, had children, and opened the flower shop. Eleanor regained control of Whitmore International and transformed it into a global company. Their lives continued without each other. Emily asked why Rose had never tried again. Rose admitted that pride became another locked door. Each year made the truth harder to revisit. Then illness arrived, and the past seemed less urgent than survival. Emily showed her the damaged arrangement. Rose touched the camellias. She understood why Eleanor had recognized them. The flowers carried a memory neither woman had forgotten. The following morning, a legal notice arrived at the shop. Vanessa's agency demanded compensation for damage to the gown, emotional distress, and reputational disruption. The amount was impossible. The Grand Meridian also canceled all future orders. By noon, a video of Emily kneeling in the ballroom appeared online. The clip began after the flowers fell. It showed Vanessa accusing Emily of ruining the dress and demanding an apology. It did not show the stain beforehand. The caption described Emily as a careless vendor who nearly destroyed a major fashion event. Thousands of comments followed. Some defended her, others mocked her clothes, her shop, and the expression on her face. People searched for Carter flowers and left false reviews. Several claimed the business used dirty water and damaged hotel property. The shop's rating collapsed within hours. Noah discovered the video at school. He returned home furious and wanted to post a public defense. Emily stopped him. She feared the agency would target him, too. Rose watched the comments in silence. She blamed herself for allowing the past to remain buried. If she had maintained her career or repaired her connection with Eleanor, Emily might not have been treated as disposable. Emily rejected that idea. Vanessa's cruelty belonged to Vanessa, but privately, Emily felt a pressure closing around her. Medical bills waited on the table. The shop's refrigerator needed repairs. Noah's application deadline was approaching. Customers were canceling orders. One public humiliation could erase years of work. That afternoon, Eleanor arrived. She came without assistance photographers or security. She stood outside the old shop, carrying the handmade business card Emily had dropped. Rose saw her through the window. Neither woman moved for several seconds. Time had changed them. Eleanor's hair was silver. Rose's body had become thin from illness. Yet beneath the years, each recognized the girl she had once trusted. Their reunion was not dramatic. There was no immediate embrace. Too much had happened between the last conversation and the present doorway. Eleanor entered the shop and looked around. She saw old photographs of Rose's arrangements, shelves repaired with uneven wood, and a table where Emily had been rebuilding the damaged camellia display. She understood how much of Rose's talent had continued without recognition. Rose explained the stolen portfolio. She showed Eleanor a faded letter from the investor's former assistant written years earlier, admitting that the documents had been forged. Rose had kept it because she could never decide whether sending it would heal anything. Eleanor read it twice. The truth was simple. They had both been manipulated. But simplicity did not make the lost decades return. Eleanor apologized for believing ambition mattered more than Rose's character. Rose apologized for allowing pride to replace one final attempt at honesty. Emily watched the women confront a wound older than she was. Their grief did not sound like anger. It sounded like mourning for the lives they might have built together. Eleanor then turned toward Emily. She explained that the hotel footage was being secured. Arthur's photographs proved the stain existed before the flowers fell. The compensation demand had no basis. Emily felt relief, but Eleanor had not come only to protect her from the claim. She wanted to understand the designs. Emily showed her sketchbooks. They contained arrangements inspired by abandoned buildings, hospital waiting rooms, train stations at dawn, and the small garden Rose once kept behind the shop. Emily did not simply combine beautiful flowers. She used them to express endurance, loneliness, memory, and hope. One design used broken stems tied with gold thread. Another placed wildflowers inside pieces of cracked glass. A third recreated the camellia pattern from Whitmore's first show, but added a single red branch through the center, representing the pain hidden inside elegance. Eleanor examined every page. She had met hundreds of young designers. Many understood trends, some understood publicity. Few understood meaning. Emily did. That did not make her ready for a major career. Talent required training, discipline, and opportunity. But Eleanor recognized the beginning of something real. She asked Emily what she wanted. Emily did not ask for fame, revenge, or money. She wanted the false claims withdrawn. She wanted the hotel to stop threatening the shop. She wanted the online video corrected. Most of all, she wanted Vanessa to be prevented from treating another worker the same way. Eleanor asked whether she wanted an apology. Emily said an apology, given only because Vanessa feared consequences, would mean very little. That answer confirmed what Eleanor already believed. Emily was not seeking a performance. She wanted accountability. Eleanor promised nothing publicly. She explained that the ambassador announcement would occur in 2 days at the final gala. Vanessa still expected to sign the contract on stage. Eleanor intended to let her believe that. Emily was uncomfortable. She did not want to become part of a public spectacle resembling the one used against her. Eleanor understood. The goal would not be humiliation for entertainment. It would be truth placed where Vanessa could no longer control it. There was a difference. Meanwhile, the investigation expanded. Hotel footage showed that the gown never came into contact with the spilled water. Backstage video captured Vanessa's assistant reporting the stain before the event. Audio from the fitting recorded Vanessa threatening to have the assistant dismissed if anyone learned about it. Other employees began speaking. A makeup artist described being slapped on the hand for using the wrong brush. A driver said Vanessa forced him to remain outside for 6 hours without food, then reported him for leaving the vehicle to use a restroom. A young model said Vanessa had mocked her weight until she stopped eating before shows. A hotel waiter reported that Vanessa deliberately spilled a drink so he would be blamed for a late table service. Each incident had seemed isolated. Together, they formed a pattern. Celeste Grant tried to stop the witnesses. She reminded them of confidentiality agreements and threatened lawsuits. Whitmore's legal team informed her that agreements could not be used to conceal workplace abuse or fraudulent claims. Celeste then contacted Eleanor's office and demanded to speak with whoever controlled the ambassador decision. She still did not know the elderly woman in the gray coat had already made it. Vanessa noticed changes around her. The signing documents had not arrived. Whitmore executives avoided confirming details. Several staff members who usually responded immediately became unavailable. Celeste assured her that delays were normal. Vanessa believed her own importance too deeply to imagine rejection. She prepared a speech for the gala. In it, she planned to speak about humility, women supporting women, and using fame to lift others. The words had been written by a public relations consultant. Vanessa practiced them in front of a mirror. On the day of the gala, Emily did not plan to attend. She remained at the shop arranging a small order for a funeral. Rose was resting upstairs. Noah was studying beside the window. Then Eleanor sent the car. Emily refused at first. Eleanor called personally and explained that the truth belonged partly to Emily. She would not be forced onto a stage or asked to speak, but she deserved to see what happened in the room where others had decided she did not belong. Rose encouraged her to go. She gave Emily an old silver brooch shaped like a camellia. Eleanor had designed it during their first year together and given it to Rose after the show that launched the company. Emily pinned it to a simple dark green dress. She did not look like a model. She did not try to. When she entered the Grand Meridian, the staff recognized her. Some looked ashamed. The event manager approached immediately, but Whitmore's legal director stopped him. Emily was no longer entering through a loading corridor. She was listed as Eleanor Whitmore's personal guest. The words traveled quickly. Vanessa heard that the flower seller had returned. She assumed the hotel had invited Emily to offer a private apology in exchange for silence. Celeste advised her to remain calm and appear generous if cameras were present. Vanessa prepared herself to forgive Emily publicly. Even now, she believed she controlled the story. The ballroom had been transformed. Whitmore designs from 5 decades surrounded the stage. Photographs showed models wearing garments inspired by gardens, storms, architecture, and memory. At the center stood a display honoring the company's first collection. The original photographs included Eleanor beside the runway. The floral arrangements appeared behind her. Rose's name was absent. Eleanor had ordered a new plaque. It identified Rose Carter as the floral artist and creative collaborator whose work shaped the collection. Emily saw it before anyone explained. Her eyes filled with tears. For the first time, her mother's contribution existed publicly. Eleanor stood nearby, wearing a black gown with the old camellia brooches matching design at the collar. Guests greeted her with deference. Hotel executives rushed to assist her. Designers who had ignored her 2 nights earlier suddenly recognized every movement. The event manager looked pale when he realized he had ordered the owner of Whitmore International to leave a service corridor. Eleanor did not embarrass him immediately. She asked whether he now knew who she was. He admitted that he did. Eleanor reminded him that he had not known who Emily was either. That had not prevented him from deciding she deserved no fairness. The manager attempted to explain that he had been protecting the event. Eleanor said he had been protecting power. She informed him that Whitmore International would suspend all partnerships with the Grand Meridian until the hotel completed an independent review of staff treatment complaint procedures and executive conduct. She also required the hotel to withdraw every claim against Carter Flowers and compensate the shop for reputational damage. The manager agreed. He had no alternative. Emily watched quietly. She did not feel victorious. She felt the strange sadness that comes when people discover fairness only after learning whom they might offend. The gala began. Vanessa arrived beneath a wall of camera flashes. She wore a white gown created specifically for the expected announcement. Her team had selected the color to represent a new beginning. Reporters described her as radiant. She saw Emily near the stage. Her smile tightened. Then she noticed Eleanor standing beside her. Recognition came slowly. Vanessa remembered the elderly woman from the corridor, the one she had ignored, the one the hotel manager had dismissed. Celeste whispered Eleanor's identity. For the first time in years, Vanessa looked genuinely afraid. The program continued. Executives spoke about Whitmore International's history. A film showed Eleanor's early years, the first collection, and the company's commitment to human dignity. Vanessa sat in the front row beneath the lights. She still hoped the contract would proceed. Powerful organizations often protected profitable people. She had survived complaints before. Public values were flexible when enough money was involved. Then Eleanor walked onto the stage. The room stood. She thanked the guests and spoke about the company's history. She acknowledged that Whitmore had made mistakes, overlooked contributors, and sometimes allowed beauty to distract from character. A new photograph appeared behind her. It showed Rose Carter arranging camellias around the first Whitmore runway. Eleanor publicly credited Rose for shaping the visual language that helped define the brand. She announced that all company archives would be corrected and that Rose would receive recognition and compensation for her early work. Emily looked toward the entrance. Rose had arrived in a wheelchair with Noah beside her. Eleanor had arranged transportation and medical support without telling Emily. The audience applauded. Rose covered her face. Decades of invisibility could not be repaired by one announcement, but the truth had entered the record. Vanessa shifted in her chair. This was not the program she expected. Eleanor then addressed the ambassador campaign. She explained that a brand did not select a representative only for appearance. A person wearing Whitmore's name carried its influence into every room, including rooms without cameras. The screen changed. A photograph of Emily's fallen flowers appeared. The ballroom became silent. Vanessa's face lost color. Eleanor did not describe Emily as helpless. She did not turn her pain into entertainment. She stated the facts. A contracted floral designer had been falsely accused of damaging a gown. She had been publicly humiliated, threatened with an impossible debt, and removed without investigation. Security footage began playing. The first clip showed Vanessa's assistant examining the stain before Emily entered. The second showed the vase falling and water moving away from the gown. The third showed Vanessa forcing Emily to kneel. Arthur's photographs appeared next, each marked with timestamps. No interpretation was required. The evidence was clear. Vanessa stood. Celeste reached for her arm, but Vanessa stepped toward the stage. She attempted to explain that the incident had been stressful and that she reacted out of fear for a valuable garment. She suggested that the misunderstanding had been exaggerated. Eleanor asked whether the other incidents were misunderstandings too. The screen displayed written statements from assistants, drivers, makeup artists, hotel workers, and models. Their names were protected where necessary, but the pattern was undeniable. Audio played from backstage. Vanessa's voice threatened an assistant over the pre-existing stain. Another recording captured her insulting a waiter. A third revealed her ordering Celeste to destroy a young model's reputation after the girl reported mistreatment. The perfect image began collapsing in the same room where it had been created. Vanessa looked toward the cameras. For years, cameras had protected her. She understood how to use them. She could create tears, vulnerability, and controlled regret. Now they recorded evidence she could not reshape. She apologized. The words came quickly. She blamed pressure exhaustion and the impossible standards placed on women in fashion. She described herself as someone who had made mistakes while fighting to survive. Some of what she said was true. The fashion industry had judged her body, age, and appearance. Powerful men had treated her cruelly when she was young. She had learned that weakness invited harm, but suffering did not give her the right to recreate that harm for others. Eleanor acknowledged that pressure could explain behavior. It could not excuse a pattern. Vanessa turned toward Emily. She offered a public apology and promised to compensate the flower shop. Emily did not move. She understood that Vanessa was speaking to the room, not to her. The apology was another attempt to control the next headline. Eleanor asked Emily whether she wished to respond. Emily had not prepared a speech. She walked onto the stage slowly. The same guests who had watched her kneel now watched her stand beneath the lights. She did not insult Vanessa. She did not ask the audience to hate her. She explained that the most painful part had not been the words. It had been seeing how quickly everyone accepted them because one person was famous and the other carried flowers through a service entrance. She said cruelty became powerful when entire rooms decided silence was safer than fairness. Several guests lowered their eyes. The statement reached beyond Vanessa. It reached the hotel manager, the agency, the guests filming for entertainment, and every person who had known the truth but waited for someone more important to speak first. Emily then said she did not want Vanessa destroyed. She wanted the people around Vanessa to stop being treated as though their livelihoods made them disposable. That distinction mattered. Justice did not require Emily to become cruel in return. Eleanor announced that Whitmore International was canceling the ambassador contract. The audience reacted with a wave of whispers. The agreement had been worth millions. Vanessa stared at Eleanor. Her career would not end entirely, but the decision would transform it. Brands would review old complaints. Agencies would reconsider risk. The image she had protected through intimidation would no longer remain unchallenged. Celeste attempted to intervene. Eleanor then revealed that Whitmore's legal team had found evidence that Celeste helped create false claims against employees and vendors. The company would refer those matters for legal review. Celeste sat down. The system that protected Vanessa had begun collapsing with her. Eleanor did not announce Emily as the new face of Whitmore. That would have turned one unfair spectacle into another fantasy. Emily was not a trained model, and she had never asked to become one. Instead, Eleanor announced the Camellia Project, a new creative campaign combining fashion, floral art, and stories of overlooked workers. Rose Carter would serve as honorary consultant. Emily would receive a full scholarship in botanical design and visual composition, followed by a paid apprenticeship with Whitmore's creative department. Her work would be evaluated, challenged, and developed. She would receive opportunity, not charity. The first collection would be inspired by the arrangements she created in the old Carter flower shop. The audience stood. This time, the applause was not for a celebrity entering the room. It was for a young woman who had been told she did not belong there. Emily looked toward Rose. Her mother was crying. Noah was smiling beside her. Eleanor placed the handmade business card on the podium. A small card dropped during humiliation had led her back to an old friend and toward a talent the industry had nearly ignored. Vanessa left before the gala ended. No security guards escorted her. Eleanor refused to recreate the cruelty Vanessa had shown Emily. She was allowed to leave privately with her team, but outside reporters waited. The same cameras that once amplified her perfection now asked about the recordings, the workers, and the canceled contract. Vanessa's first response was defensive. She said the event had been manipulated. She claimed competitors had used a private mistake against her. She accused Whitmore International of sacrificing her for publicity. The statements made the situation worse. More former employees came forward. A stylist described years of threats. An assistant produced messages showing Vanessa demanding unpaid work. A photographer released footage of her insulting disabled guests during a charity event after she believed the cameras had stopped. Within weeks, several brands ended their partnerships. Her agency placed her under review. The magazine covers disappeared. For someone who built her identity around being admired, the loss of control was more painful than the loss of money. Yet Eleanor's decision left one path open. She offered Vanessa access to an independent accountability program involving workplace conduct, restitution, and direct support for employees she had harmed. Completion would not restore the Whitmore contract. It would not erase the evidence. It would simply give Vanessa a chance to change without receiving applause for beginning. At first, Vanessa refused. She believed consequences were persecution. Months later, after Celeste's agency collapsed and several legal claims moved forward, Vanessa entered the program. Her transformation was not immediate. Real change rarely happens in one public apology. She resisted. She blamed others. She tried to negotiate the process. But for the first time in years, the people around her did not depend on pleasing her. She had to listen. She met former assistants who described the anxiety debt and career damage her actions caused. She learned that one young model left the industry after months of humiliation. She discovered that Maria, the hotel seamstress, had nearly lost her job because Vanessa blamed her for a torn hem. Vanessa could no longer treat these people as background figures. They had names. Their pain continued after her attention moved elsewhere. Whether Vanessa became a better person remained uncertain, but the protection surrounding her cruelty ended. That was the justice Emily had wanted. For Emily, the months following the gala were difficult in a different way. Public attention arrived suddenly. News stories described her as the flower girl who defeated a supermodel. Invitations came from talk shows, brands, and influencers. Some wanted to tell her story. Others wanted to use it. Eleanor advised caution. She explained that public sympathy was temporary. People who celebrated an underdog one week often searched for flaws the next. Emily should build skills rather than depend on attention. Emily agreed. She accepted the scholarship and began classes. The first weeks were humbling. She understood flowers intuitively, but she lacked formal knowledge of design history, business planning, digital tools, and large-scale installation. Other students had traveled widely and studied art for years. Some assumed Emily had been admitted only because of the scandal. Instead of becoming defensive, she worked. She arrived early. She practiced after classes. She asked questions. When criticism hurt, she separated cruelty from instruction. Vanessa had used judgment to make her feel small. Her teachers used honest feedback to help her grow. That distinction changed everything. Eleanor did not protect Emily from failure. She gave her access to it. Emily's first Whitmore installation was rejected because it could not survive transportation. Her second was too complicated for the production budget. Her third looked beautiful in sketches, but disappeared beneath stage lighting. Each failure taught her something. Talent became discipline. Rose's health also changed. Eleanor arranged for specialists to review her treatment. She did not present the support as repayment for lost years. She acknowledged that no amount of money could return the career Rose might have had. The new treatment did not cure everything, but it reduced Rose's pain and gave her more strength. For the first time in years, she returned to the shop floor. She taught students how to prepare fragile stems, how to recognize flowers that had been forced to bloom too early, and how to create balance without making every side identical. Eleanor visited often. The friendship between the two women did not return to what it had been at 19. Too much time had passed. They could not become young again. They built something new. They spoke honestly about ambition, betrayal, pride, and silence. They reviewed old collections and identified where Rose's influence had been erased. Whitmore International created an archival exhibition crediting overlooked assistants, seamstresses, pattern cutters, and floral artists. Rose's story became part of a larger correction. She had not been the only invisible person behind a famous name. Eleanor understood that recognizing one friend meant examining the entire system that allowed recognition to disappear. The Grand Meridian also changed. The event manager lost his position after the independent review found repeated mistreatment of temporary workers. Several supervisors had ignored complaints because wealthy guests received priority. The hotel created procedures requiring evidence before vendors could be charged for damage. Maria was promoted to oversee garment services. The two security guards who treated Emily respectfully were retained and given additional training authority. The hotel did not become fair because of one statement. Policies changed because public embarrassment made denial impossible. Emily remained careful about praising institutions too quickly. She had learned that values mattered most before powerful witnesses arrived. A year after the gala, the Camellia Project was ready. The collection explored dignity under pressure. The garments used layered fabrics resembling petals, damaged by rain but still attached to their stems. Gold thread repaired deliberate tears. Dark green structures supported pale flowers. Several pieces incorporated patterns based on Rose's original arrangements. Emily designed the environments around the clothing. Instead of a traditional runway, guests moved through spaces representing the hidden labor behind beauty. A market before sunrise, a sewing room after midnight, a hotel corridor, a flower shop, and finally, an open garden. The final installation contained hundreds of white camellias. Some were perfect, others were bruised, bent, or missing petals. Emily refused to discard the damaged flowers. She arranged them at the center. The message was simple. Worth did not disappear when something had been stepped on. The collection opened at the Grand Meridian Hotel. Emily had resisted the location. The ballroom still carried memories of humiliation. She could remember the marble beneath her knees and the sound of strangers filming. Eleanor believed returning could transform the space, but she allowed Emily to decide. Emily agreed under one condition. All temporary workers involved in the event would be credited, paid fairly, and invited to the final presentation. The hotel accepted. On the morning of the opening, Emily entered through the front doors. No one stopped her. Staff members greeted her by name. Her designs filled the lobby. Carter Flowers appeared on the official program beside Whitmore International. Rose arrived in a wheelchair decorated with small camellias. Noah, now a university student, walked beside her. Eleanor waited near the ballroom entrance. For a moment, Emily saw the past layered over the present. She saw the broken vase, Vanessa's silver shoes, the hotel manager's documents, the elderly woman in the gray coat. Then the doors opened. Guests entered the world Emily had created. The first room was nearly dark. A recording played the sounds of flower markets before dawn trucks reversing water, filling buckets, paper wrapping stems, and tired workers preparing beauty for people who would never know their names. The second room honored seamstresses, cleaners, drivers, assistants, and servers. Their hands appeared in large photographs, Their names covered the walls. The third room contained the damaged camellias. At the center stood the restored arrangement Emily had carried the night she was humiliated. The cracked vase had been repaired with gold. Guests stopped before it. Some recognized the story. Emily did not place Vanessa's name beside the display. The work was not about preserving another person's shame. It was about what survived it. The final room opened into sunlight. Rose and Eleanor stood together beneath an arch of white flowers. Above them appeared the names Rose Carter and Emily Carter, not hidden in small print, not absent from the record, visible. The collection received international attention. Critics praised the emotional intelligence of the designs. Fashion schools requested lectures. Museums asked to display pieces. Emily's career did not become effortless. Success created new pressures. Investors wanted faster collections. Brands tried to reduce her story to a marketable image. Some critics accused Whitmore of using social justice as publicity. Emily responded by keeping the work accountable. The Camellia Project created grants for young designers from low-income backgrounds. It required partner hotels and production companies to follow fair labor standards. A portion of each collection funded emergency support for freelance workers injured or mistreated during events. Emily understood that kindness without structure could disappear when attention moved on. She wanted fairness built into contracts, not only speeches. 3 years later, she became creative director of Whitmore's Botanical Design Division. She was still young. She still made mistakes, but she remembered the service corridor every time someone entered her studio carrying supplies. She learned names. She asked whether workers had eaten. She checked payment schedules before approving decorative budgets. Small actions did not make her heroic. They made cruelty less likely to hide beneath urgency. Eleanor watched her progress with pride. She also challenged her. Once, after Emily rejected an assistant's idea too quickly, Eleanor reminded her that power often changed people through ordinary habits, not dramatic acts. A person did not wake one morning and become Vanessa Cole. They became Vanessa each time no one questioned how they treated someone beneath them. Emily apologized to the assistant and reviewed the idea again. It was not perfect, but the correction mattered. Leadership, she learned, required remaining afraid of your own capacity to become careless. Rose lived long enough to attend the opening of the second Camellia collection. Her health had weakened, but her mind remained sharp. She sat beside Eleanor in the front row and watched models move through a garden inspired by the small yard behind Carter Flowers. At the end, Emily walked onto the stage. She did not take the applause alone. She brought every florist, assistant, builder, seamstress, lighting technician, and cleaner forward. The stage became crowded. That was the point. Beautiful things were rarely created by one visible person. Rose died the following winter. The loss devastated Emily. For weeks, she could not enter the flower shop. Every scent carried a memory. Every unfinished arrangement seemed to wait for Rose's hands. Eleanor remained near without trying to fill the silence. She knew grief could not be organized like a company problem. When Emily was ready, they returned to the shop together. On Rose's work table lay a final sketch. It showed a single camellia surrounded by rough leaves. Beneath it, Rose had written that flowers did not choose where they grew, but they still turned toward light. Emily used the sketch for a memorial collection. The proceeds supported medical care for independent artists and small business workers. Rose's life had begun in a market, passed through fashion history without credit, and ended with her name helping others survive. That was not perfect justice. Perfect justice would have returned the stolen decades. But meaningful justice allowed the truth to produce something beyond regret. Vanessa attended Rose's memorial exhibition. She came without cameras. Her appearance surprised Emily. Vanessa had completed the accountability program and spent several years away from major campaigns. She worked occasionally, but no longer commanded the industry. Some people believed she had changed. Others remained skeptical. Emily did not owe her trust. Vanessa approached carefully. She did not ask for public forgiveness. She did not describe herself as the real victim. She acknowledged that the night in the ballroom had revealed something she had spent years refusing to see. She had believed being mistreated during her early career gave her permission to mistreat others once she gained power. It did not. She offered to fund part of the worker support program anonymously. Emily accepted only after ensuring the money carried no influence over the organization. Their relationship did not become friendship. Forgiveness did not require closeness. Emily allowed the past to stop controlling every future encounter, but she never rewrote what happened. Vanessa's consequences remained. So did Emily's boundaries. Eleanor approved. She had never wanted vengeance. She wanted the truth to interrupt a cycle before more people were damaged. Years later, the video of Emily kneeling still existed online. New viewers sometimes discovered it without context. They saw a famous model humiliating a flower seller and assumed the satisfying part of the story came later, when the elderly woman revealed her power and destroyed Vanessa's contract. But that was not the deepest lesson. The story mattered because Eleanor's power should never have been necessary for Emily to receive basic dignity. The guest should not have needed to learn that the old woman controlled the company. The hotel manager should not have needed to discover Emily was connected to someone influential. The evidence should have mattered before the consequences became expensive. Emily deserved fairness when everyone believed she was only a flower seller. That was the truth Eleanor repeated whenever people praised her intervention. She had done the right thing. But the room had already failed before she acted. It failed when guests chose entertainment over compassion. It failed when managers protected a celebrity without examining facts. It failed when employees stayed silent because they feared losing work. It failed when an entire industry treated invisible people as replaceable. Vanessa's cruelty was obvious. The silence around it was more dangerous. That silence had protected her for years. Emily's life changed because one person with authority refused to participate in it. But Emily later used her own success to make sure future workers would not need a hidden billionaire nearby before someone listened. That became her real achievement. Not the scholarship, not the collections, not the title. Her greatest work was helping build rooms where dignity did not depend on recognition. The Carter Flower Shop remained open. Emily renovated it but preserved the old sign. The ground floor became both a working shop and a training studio. Young people who could not afford traditional art schools learned floral design, business management, and event production there. A photograph of Rose and Eleanor from their first fashion show hung near the entrance. Beside it was a newer photograph of the two women laughing in the same shop decades later. Below both photographs sat the repaired vase. Visitors often asked about the gold lines running through the glass. Emily explained that the vase broke during the worst night of her professional life. She chose not to hide the damage. The cracks became part of the design. On certain afternoons, Eleanor sat near the shop window with tea. She still wore simple coats. New students sometimes mistook her for an ordinary elderly customer. Emily never corrected them immediately. She watched how they treated her. Most were kind. A few became impatient. Those moments became lessons. Eleanor told them that character revealed itself most clearly when no reward seemed possible. It was easy to be gracious toward an executive. It was easy to praise a famous designer. It was easy to smile for someone who might open a door. The true test came with the cleaner, the driver, the nervous intern, the exhausted waiter, and the young woman carrying flowers through a side corridor. People often believed power showed who they could command. Eleanor believed power showed whose dignity they were willing to protect. That belief shaped the company long after she retired. Emily eventually took a seat on Whitmore International's Ethics and Creative Council. She supported policies that allowed temporary workers to report mistreatment directly without going through event managers or agencies dependent on celebrities. Complaints increased during the first year. Some executives considered that a bad sign. Emily disagreed. The harm had always existed. Now people believed speaking might matter. Silence had once made the company look peaceful. Truth made it healthier. The lessons of the ballroom followed Emily throughout her career. Whenever praise became loud, She remembered how quickly the same room once agreed that she was worthless. Whenever criticism hurt, she examined whether it carried truth before rejecting it. Whenever an employee made a mistake, she investigated before assigning blame. Whenever someone powerful demanded immediate punishment for someone weaker, she asked who controlled the story. She did not become perfect. She became careful. That carefulness protected more people than perfection ever could. The final collection Eleanor attended as chairwoman returned to the Grand Meridian one last time. By then, Emily was no longer introduced as Rose Carter's daughter or the flower girl from the viral video. She had earned a name through years of work. The ballroom was filled with flowers suspended above the audience. White camellias moved gently in the air. Beneath them, models wore designs created by teams from several countries. At the center of the stage stood no single celebrity image. Instead, a screen displayed the names of every person involved. The list continued for several minutes. Guests remained seated and watched. Emily stood beside Eleanor near the same wall where the old woman had once held a cup of tea and observed Vanessa's cruelty. The hotel had replaced the marble section where the vase broke, but Emily could still identify the exact place. Eleanor asked whether returning still hurt. Emily considered the question. The memory remained painful, but the room no longer owned it. She had entered through the front doors. Her mother's name filled the program. Workers were credited. The damaged flowers had inspired something lasting. Pain had become direction. That did not make the humiliation necessary. People often romanticized suffering after success. They suggested that cruelty had made Emily stronger, or that Vanessa had accidentally given her an opportunity. Emily rejected that idea. Vanessa had not created her talent. Poverty had not created her compassion. Humiliation had not created her dignity. Those qualities existed before the ballroom. The injustice only revealed them to people who had failed to notice. Emily would have preferred to be treated fairly from the beginning. Every person deserves success without first being publicly broken. Still, when harm occurred, she chose what to build from it. That choice belonged to her. At the end of the presentation, Eleanor walked onto the stage for her retirement announcement. She spoke about fashion legacy and the danger of confusing admiration with worth. Then she invited Emily and the full creative team to join her. The audience rose. Among them sat former hotel workers' assistants, students from Carter Flowers, and young designers supported by the Camellia Grants. Emily looked across the room. She remembered kneeling alone. Now she stood surrounded by people whose names were visible. That was the image she carried forward. Not Vanessa's face, not the cameras, not the stain, the people. After the applause ended, Emily walked to the center arrangement and removed one white camellia. She gave it to Eleanor. The flower was delicate, just like the one that had fallen years earlier. But this time, no one stepped on it. Eleanor held it carefully. Outside the hotel, evening rain began falling across the city. Workers loaded equipment into trucks. Cleaners entered the ballroom. Assistants collected garments. Drivers waited near the entrance. The event did not truly end when the guests left. It ended when the last invisible person finished working. Emily stayed until then. She helped remove flowers, thanked the staff, and checked that temporary workers received transportation home. No photographers remained. No headlines would mention it. That was why it mattered. The story of Emily Carter was often told as a tale of poetic justice. A famous model humiliated a poor flower seller. A mysterious elderly woman witnessed everything. The elderly woman turned out to control the model's dream contract. The cruel person lost her opportunity. The overlooked girl received one. All of that was true. But poetic justice was not simply that Vanessa lost what she wanted. It was that the exact qualities she mocked became the foundation of Emily's future. Vanessa called Emily's flowers worthless. They inspired an international collection. She said Emily did not belong near Whitmore Designs. Emily later created them. She treated the flower shop as insignificant. Its name appeared in museums and schools. She believed dignity came from expensive clothing. Emily proved it could survive in a wet dress on a marble floor. Vanessa used cameras to increase humiliation. The same recordings exposed her behavior. She expected powerful people to protect her. The most powerful person in the room was the one she had ignored. And Rose Carter, whose work had once been erased from Whitmore's history, lived to see her daughter return that truth to the light. That was justice, not revenge. Restoration. Eleanor also learned something. She had spent decades believing she knew how success could corrupt people. Yet Emily reminded her that institutions did not become ethical because one good leader watched every room. Systems had to protect dignity, even when the leader was absent. Eleanor used the final years of her authority to change contracts, reporting structures, and hiring practices. She made sure Whitmore's values existed beyond speeches and personal judgment. The company became stronger because it admitted where it had failed. Rose's erased contribution. Emily's treatment. The workers silenced by Vanessa's influence. Every correction began with the willingness to look directly at what was uncomfortable. That became Eleanor's final legacy. Emily's legacy continued. Young florists entered Carter Flowers carrying cheap notebooks and impossible ideas. Some came from families like hers. Some cared for sick parents. Some worked 2 jobs. Some had been told art belonged to wealthier people. Emily never promised them fame. She promised them training honesty and a place where mistakes would not be confused with worthlessness. When flowers fell, they picked them up together. Sometimes the damaged ones became the most interesting part of the arrangement. On the wall above the main work table, Emily placed a sentence her mother often repeated. It explained that beauty was not the absence of damage. Beauty was the care given afterward. That sentence summarized the entire journey. The vase broke. The friendship between Rose and Eleanor broke. Emily's trust in fairness broke. Vanessa's public image broke. None returned to its original form. Some things should not. The repaired shapes carried truth the perfect surfaces had hidden. Years after Eleanor's retirement, Emily visited her at a quiet home outside the city. The garden was filled with camellias. Eleanor moved more slowly and relied heavily on her cane, but her attention remained sharp. They sat beneath an old tree while students from Carter Flowers arranged a small exhibition nearby. Eleanor asked whether Emily ever wondered what would have happened if she had not been in the ballroom that night. Emily had considered it many times. The hotel might have forced the shop to close. The false video might have defined her publicly. Vanessa might have signed the contract and continued harming people. Rose and Eleanor might never have met again. The thought remained frightening. But Emily no longer wanted her life's meaning to depend on a powerful woman's accidental presence. She told Eleanor that the goal was to build a world where the next Emily did not need an Eleanor watching from the corner. Eleanor smiled. That answer was why she had trusted her. Power had opened the first door. Emily used the opportunity to remove the lock for others. When Eleanor died, the fashion world remembered her as a visionary founder. Emily remembered the elderly woman in the gray coat who picked up a small business card from the floor. At the memorial, she placed a white camellia beside Eleanor's photograph. Arthur Bell displayed the image he had taken that night. It showed Emily kneeling near the broken vase. Vanessa stood above her. Guests watched. At the edge of the frame, almost unnoticed, Eleanor stared toward the scene. The photograph captured three kinds of power. Vanessa possessed attention. The guests possessed choice. Eleanor possessed authority. Only one used power to restore dignity. Emily later added a fourth meaning. She said the kneeling girl possessed something no one in the room understood yet. She possessed a future they could not see. That future became larger than the humiliation, larger than Vanessa's contract, larger than one fashion company. It became proof that the person dismissed as insignificant might be carrying talent, history, and strength hidden from everyone too arrogant to look closely. So whenever someone is tempted to judge a person by clothing, job title, accent, income, or the entrance they were told to use, Emily's story offers a warning. You may not know whose daughter she is. You may not know what talent she carries. You may not know who is watching. But none of those things should be necessary. Respect should not depend on discovering that a poor person has powerful connections. Kindness should not be an investment made only when a reward is possible. The way someone treats the powerless reveals more than any speech campaign or public smile. Vanessa Cole learned that too late. She entered the ballroom believing every important eye was focused on her. She did not notice the elderly woman beside the wall. She did not notice the photographer preserving the truth. She did not notice the workers remembering years of mistreatment. She did not notice the talent kneeling among broken flowers. Arrogance narrowed her vision until she could see only people who seemed useful. That blindness cost her the opportunity she valued most. Emily entered the same ballroom believing she had lost everything. She left with no guarantee of rescue, but she protected her dignity, helped another worker refuse to sign a lie, and remained compassionate while humiliated. Those choices revealed who she was before anyone offered her a scholarship or title. Success did not create Emily's character. Character prepared her to carry success without becoming the person who once harmed her. That was why Eleanor chose her. Not as a replacement celebrity, not as an object of pity, as a young artist worthy of a chance. Years later, when Emily stood in the ballroom as a creative director, she always looked toward the service entrance before the show began. She remembered the girl carrying flowers through it. She remembered the weight of the vase, the cold water on her dress, the marble beneath her knees. Then she looked around at the credited workers, open reporting systems, paid apprentices, and students standing beside professionals. The memory no longer asked her to feel ashamed. It reminded her what leadership was for. Leadership was not the power to make everyone in a room notice you. It was the responsibility to notice the people the room had decided not to see. On the night Vanessa humiliated her, Emily Carter appeared to be the least powerful person in the Grand Meridian Hotel. She had no money, no influence, no famous name. She carried flowers for a living and worried about hospital bills waiting at home. Vanessa had beauty fame cameras and an expected contract worth millions. Yet beneath all that attention, Vanessa's power was fragile. It depended on people believing the image. Emily's strength was different. It came from years of responsibility, love work, and quiet endurance. It did not disappear when the room laughed. It did not disappear when security removed her. It did not disappear when strangers called her worthless. And once Eleanor Whitmore saw that strength, she did not create it. She simply refused to let the world ignore it again. The flower that fell first was a white camellia, a symbol of quiet strength. At the time, no one understood how perfectly it represented the young woman carrying it. The petals were crushed. The vase was broken. The arrangement was destroyed. But the story inside it survived. And in the end, the girl Vanessa, forced to gather flowers from the floor, returned to fill the entire ballroom with them. This time, her name was on every program. Her mother's name was in the company archives. The workers stood beside her. The doors were open, and no one in that room would ever again mistake silence, poverty, or humility for a lack of power.